Welcome back to History Teller YT. Today we are diving into the golden days of the Subanen people, exploring their rivers, forests, rituals, and the heart of their communities. From daily life by the river, the leadership of their elders, to the magnificent Buklog festival that unites families, this story takes you deep into a world where tradition, harmony, and respect for nature guide every action. Stay with us as we journey through their rich culture, learn their wisdom, and experience the rhythm of life that has been passed down through generations. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment. Long ago, before the noise of modern cities and machines filled the air, the land of Mindanao stretched wide with valleys, mountains, and thick forests that seemed endless. Through these lands flowed rivers that cut the earth like silver threads, winding their way from the high mountains down to the sea. These rivers were not only natural wonders, but also the very lifeline of the Subanen people. To them, the river was a provider, a protector, and a bridge connecting one community to another. When the Subanen rose with the dawn, the first sound they heard was the gentle rush of the river's current, and the first sight was the mist floating above the water as the sun rose. The Subanen people built their villages close to these rivers, knowing that they carried fish to feed families, fresh water to keep farms alive, and paths that allowed travel between scattered settlements. To the Subanen, living near the river meant living close to the pulse of nature. Their lives moved with its rhythm, from the steady calm of dry seasons to the sudden floods of the rains. The riverbanks, with their soft soil and tall grasses, became playgrounds for children and gathering places for families. Life, laughter, work, and worship all found their place beside the flowing waters. In the village of Gumutan, one of the many Subanen communities, bamboo and nipa houses stood tall on stilts. Their design was not just for beauty, but for purpose, protecting families from floods, insects, and wild animals. From these homes, the Subanen watched the sun rise over rice paddies and coconut groves. The smell of damp earth, the sound of roosters crowing, and the chatter of early workers created a daily symphony of life. This was a world where humans and nature lived as one, bound by respect, tradition, and gratitude. At dawn, Gumutan awoke with a quiet but steady energy. Men prepared their canoes, sharpening hunting spears or mending fishing nets. With laughter and short calls to one another, they pushed their boats into the water, paddling into the river's mist to hunt or fish. The river not only provided food, but also tested their skill and patience, teaching lessons of respect for the creatures within it. Women, equally busy, carried baskets of rice to the drying racks. Their fingers, hardened yet graceful from years of work, wove mats and crafted cloth dyed in bright colors that reflected the beauty of the land around them. Children filled the village with joy. They played along the banks, hopping over stones and splashing water, their bare feet leaving muddy prints on the soft ground. Their laughter mixed with the croak of frogs hiding in reeds and the sharp cries of kingfishers as they dove for fish. These moments of play were more than games. They were ways to learn agility, balance, and connection to the river that sustained them. The Subanen taught their children through observation. They watched how elders worked, listened to songs played on bamboo flutes, and slowly absorbed the rhythm of their culture. The Subanen believed deeply in the unseen spirits of their land. The river, the forest, and even the sky were home to guardians. Before hunting, planting, or fishing, the people whispered prayers, asking permission and blessings from these spirits. They knew that life flowed best when man and nature respected each other. This respect was passed down generation to generation, shaping not only their faith, but their way of living. To the Subanen, every task, no matter how simple, was sacred, and every day was a gift from both ancestors and nature. The people of Gumutan lived not with wealth of gold or jewels, but with the wealth of harmony. Their strength was found in unity and respect for the environment. The forest gave them animals to hunt and wood to build, yet they took only what they needed. The rivers offered fish, but never more than what could feed their families. They saw the world not as something to conquer, but as something to share life with. The Subanen believed that each tree, each stone, each bird carried a spirit, and to harm them without cause would bring misfortune. This belief guided their actions. Before planting rice, the farmers offered prayers to the spirits of the earth. Before felling a tree, hunters left a small token, such as betel nut or rice, as a sign of respect. The Balian, the spiritual leader, often reminded the people that to live in balance was to ensure peace and abundance for all. Even children grew up knowing that to throw stones at animals without reason, to waste food, or to insult elders was to disturb the delicate harmony that kept their world alive. Life was simple but deeply meaningful. There was no rush, no endless pursuit of possessions. Instead, there was the joy of working together, the comfort of knowing everyone had a place, and the wisdom of living in balance. As the river flowed endlessly, so did the life of the Subanen, calm, steady, and full of gratitude. This was the foundation of their golden days, a time when man, nature, and spirit were one. In every Subanen village, leadership was not a matter of power or wealth, but of wisdom, fairness, and trust. At the very heart of Gumutan and its neighboring communities stood the figure of the Timuay, the headman chosen by the people. The Timuay was not a ruler who commanded with fear. Instead, he guided with patience and deep understanding. His authority rested not on weapons or force, but on the respect that he had earned through his actions, his fairness in judgment, and his devotion to the well-being of all. When disputes arose between families or neighbors, the Timuay did not rush to punishment. Instead, he called everyone together beneath a great tree at the center of the village. There, seated on woven mats, the people spoke their concerns while the Timuay listened in silence. His silence was not weakness, but wisdom. He believed that the words of the angry often needed time to settle, like the river's mud that clears only after stillness. Only when every voice was heard did he speak, reminding them that no quarrel was greater than the peace of the community. His voice carried the weight of ancestors, for he often invoked the wisdom passed down from countless generations. The Timuay also safeguarded the laws of the Subanen, laws that were never written on paper but carved into memory through tradition. These laws spoke of kinship, respect, and harmony. They were not imposed by force, but by mutual belief that peace was life itself. The Timuay was the living guardian of these teachings, and through him, the people remembered that every action carried responsibility, not just to the self, but to the family, the village, and the spirits watching over them. Beside the wisdom of the Timuay stood the strength of the Megalong, the warriors of the Subanen. Unlike warriors in far-off kingdoms who fought for conquest and power, the Megalong trained only to defend their people. They were tall, strong, and disciplined, armed with spears, bows, and shields woven from rattan and hardened by fire. Their duty was not to seek battles, but to stand ready should danger come, whether from raiders, wild animals, or rival groups. The training of the Megalong began in childhood. From the time they could run, boys were taught how to move silently through the forest, how to read tracks in the soil, and how to listen for the faintest sound of danger. They played games that sharpened their aim, shooting arrows at moving leaves or spears at floating logs in the river. These games, though playful, were lessons in skill and discipline. By the time they reached manhood, they were hunters of great precision and warriors of great courage. Yet strength alone was never enough. A Megalong was expected to carry not only weapons, but also the burden of responsibility. He could not act in anger, for his power was meant for protection, not destruction. The elders often reminded them, a warrior's strength belongs to the people, not to himself. When danger approached, the Megalong formed a living shield around their village, their courage a wall that preserved peace. But in times of calm, they were farmers, hunters, and fathers, living side by side with the people they vowed to protect. Their bravery gave the Subanen confidence that no storm of violence could easily break their unity. If the Timuay was the keeper of peace and the Megalong the guardian of strength, then the Balian was the bridge between the visible and the unseen. The Balian, often a woman adorned with beads, feathers, and woven garments, carried the sacred duty of guiding rituals and healing the sick. Her voice rose like music during prayers, strong yet soothing, echoing through forests and rivers. She understood the herbs of the land, the roots that cured fever, the leaves that eased wounds, the flowers that calmed the restless spirit. But her power was more than medicine. She was believed to speak with the spirits, to sense the balance between the human world and the unseen guardians of rivers, trees, and mountains. During times of sickness, families turned to the Balian not only for remedies, but for guidance, believing that illness often came when the spirits were displeased. With chants, offerings, and smoke from burning leaves, she restored harmony, reminding the people that health was both physical and spiritual. Her presence at rituals like the Buklog gave assurance that the ancestors and spirits listened to their prayers. Alongside her stood the elders, the living libraries of the Subanen. Their memories carried the stories of great hunts, ancient migrations, and the laws of kinship that bound families together. Under the shade of trees, they recited tales of heroes and ancestors, reminding the young of who they were and why they lived the way they did. The elders were not just storytellers. They were teachers, guardians of identity, and voices of continuity. Through them, the people of Gumutan knew that their present was rooted in a past that stretched back through countless generations. Together, the Timuay with his wisdom, the Megalong with their strength, the Balian with her spiritual bridge, and the elders with their memory, the Subanen community thrived. Each leader had a role, each role carried weight, and together they formed the pillars of harmony that kept life steady and meaningful. When the first light of morning brushed across the sky, Gumutan stirred into life with a quiet, steady rhythm. Unlike the bustling cities of today, where noise and haste defined the hours, the Subanen village awoke in harmony with nature's pace. The roosters crowed, frogs still croaked from the damp riverbanks, and a thin mist floated above the paddies. Farmers began their day by stepping into the cool, ankle-deep water of the rice fields, their reflections rippling as they planted tender green seedlings into the earth. These fields, carefully flooded and guarded by bamboo fences, were more than just sources of food. They were sacred places where life was nurtured with patience and prayer. Men bent their backs to the soil, knowing that each grain of rice represented survival through seasons of rain and sun. They worked not alone but side by side, families and neighbors joining hands to plant, harvest, and protect the paddies. To the Subanen, farming was never just labor. It was a ritual of gratitude to the earth and the spirits of fertility. Before the first seed was pressed into the mud, elders whispered blessings, asking the unseen guardians of land and water to make the crops grow strong. Hunters, meanwhile, prepared for their own tasks. They entered the forest with sharpened spears and bows, but also with respect for the creatures they sought. The Subanen taught their children that a hunt was never to kill recklessly, but to restore balance, taking only what was needed and leaving enough for the forest to remain abundant. When they returned with wild pigs, deer, or birds, the meat was shared across households, ensuring that no family went hungry. The act of sharing food was not an act of charity, but of duty. In Gumutan, hunger was never faced alone. The community lived as one body, each member supporting the other, bound together by trust, faith, and kinship. As the men toiled in the fields or ventured into forests, the women of Gumutan filled the air with the soft, steady music of daily work. The pounding of rice echoed like drum beats, wooden pestles striking rhythmically against mortars as husks separated from the grains. These sounds were more than background noise. They were part of the living symphony of Subanen life. Women carried baskets to drying racks, wove mats from reeds, and spun bright threads that blossomed into cloth patterned with reds, yellows, and greens. Every weave told a story, a hidden symbol of blessings, protection, or remembrance of ancestors. Cooking fires burned near the houses, their smoke rising slowly into the air. The scent of boiling root crops mixed with the sweetness of roasting bananas. Children, curious and lively, darted between these spaces, learning as they played. They carried small bundles of firewood, fetched water from the river in clay jars, or tried their hands at weaving small mats under their mother's guidance. Yet they also laughed and splashed by the riverbanks, leaping over stones, balancing on bamboo poles, and watching kingfishers dive. Play and work were never separate for them. They were both ways of learning, training their hands, eyes, and hearts for the lives they would one day lead. Music was woven into this rhythm. The sound of bamboo flutes, drums, and the gongs of the kolintang drifted through the village, marking the hours and giving energy to labor. Sometimes young boys tapped rhythms on hollow logs, imitating their elders. Girls sang playful songs as they worked, their voices carrying far into the fields. The Subanen saw no division between art and survival. Song, weaving, hunting, and farming were all equal parts of life's beauty. In their harmony, they saw not only the continuation of tradition, but the joy of being alive. What made daily life in Gumutan extraordinary was not its tasks, planting rice, hunting, weaving, or fishing, but the spirit in which these tasks were carried out. No one worked solely for themselves. If a family faced illness or loss, the others stepped in, tending their fields, cooking their meals, and caring for their children. If one hunter returned with a large catch, he did not hoard it. Instead, he distributed the meat, knowing that another day he might return empty-handed and depend on others. Sharing was not optional. It was the lifeblood of the community. Conflicts did arise, as they always do where people live close together. Yet even these were handled with patience and balance. The Timuay gathered the disputing families beneath the great tree and reminded them that anger was like fire. It could either warm or destroy. He urged them to see beyond pride, to place the community's peace above their personal quarrels. And because the people trusted him, his words carried weight. Harmony was restored not through punishment, but through wisdom and forgiveness. Afternoons were filled with skill sharing and storytelling. Men sharpened spears, repaired nets, or carved wooden tools while discussing hunts or harvests. Women sat together weaving, exchanging techniques and laughter. Children listened to elders recounting tales of ancestors and spirits, absorbing lessons hidden in myth and song. As the sun dipped low and the golden light touched the forest, the village felt whole. Every person, every task, every sound blending into one living rhythm. Daily harmony was not simply the absence of conflict. It was the deliberate act of living as one, respecting each role and honoring the balance between people and nature. In this way, Gumutan thrived. The Subanen understood that unity was their greatest treasure, and as long as they nurtured it, their way of life would remain unbroken, flowing steady like the river beside them. Among all the rhythms of daily Subanen life, none stirred the people's spirits more than the announcement of the Buklog. It was not an ordinary gathering. The Buklog was the grand ritual of Thanksgiving, the moment when the Subanen came together to honor their ancestors, the spirits of the rivers and forests, and the blessings of the harvest. Weeks before the celebration, word spread from house to house, field to field, forest to forest. The Timuay, Balian, and elders agreed on the date, guided by signs in the sky, the phases of the moon, and the readiness of the people. At once, the atmosphere in Gumutan shifted. The usual pace of life, already full of work and duty, took on an extra layer of excitement. Men prepared their axes and ropes to enter the forest, knowing they would need to cut massive hardwood trees to build the Buklog platform. These trees were chosen carefully, with permission sought from the forest spirits before they were felled. No tree was cut without prayer. A small offering of betel nut, rice, or wine was placed at the tree's roots, and only after the Balian whispered chants did the men raise their blades. The forest was not plundered but asked for its strength, and in return, the Subanen promised to use it for unity, not destruction. Back in the village, women began their own preparations. They gathered reeds and fibers, weaving bright mats in reds, yellows, and greens. They pounded rice for long hours, filling jars that would later be cooked into food to feed hundreds. Pots bubbled with fermenting roots and rice, transforming slowly into pangasi, the sweet, potent wine that would flow freely during the festival. Children, too, joined the preparations. They carried bundles of firewood, fetched water from the river, and watched the older women with curious eyes, learning that even the smallest contribution was part of something larger. Day by day, the village transformed into a living workshop, every sound echoing with purpose. The pounding of rice, the chopping of wood, the weaving of mats, the laughter of children. It was all part of the symphony that prepared Gumutan for its most sacred celebration. At Kuti, the center of the preparation, stood the mighty task of building the Buklog platform. This was no ordinary structure. It had to be strong enough to hold the weight of hundreds of stomping feet, yet flexible enough to tremble and produce the deep resonant sound that connected the living with the spirits. To the Subanen, the Buklog was not just a stage. It was a bridge between worlds, a place where man, ancestor, and spirit could meet in harmony. The men worked together like a single body. They hauled the massive hardwood posts from the forest, their shoulders straining, their chants rising to keep rhythm as they dragged the logs through mud and riverbanks. Sweat rolled down their backs, but their faces shone with pride. Each man knew he was not working for himself, but for the entire community. With ropes of rattan and vines, they bound the posts tightly, raising them upright in the central clearing of the village. Beneath the platform, hollow logs were hung like drums, ready to echo with the thunder of the people's dance. As the frame took shape, women brought mats to cover the platform, weaving their colors into the structure until it seemed alive with patterns. Children ran in circles around the workers, singing playful songs, while elders supervised with watchful eyes, ensuring the traditions were followed exactly. The Balian visited often, chanting prayers and sprinkling water over the posts to bless them. She explained to the children that without prayer, the structure would be nothing but wood and rope. With prayer, It became sacred, a vessel that carried their thanksgiving to the unseen guardians. The building of the Buklog was more than labor. It was a performance of unity. Every lifted log, every tightened knot, every woven mat was a declaration that the Subanen stood together as one. When the final post was raised and the hollow logs echoed with the first test stomps, cheers broke across the clearing. The platform was alive. The stage for the Buklog was ready, waiting only for the people to gather and the spirits to listen. While the men and women built the platform and prepared food, the Balian oversaw the most delicate and sacred task, the preparation of offerings. For the Subanen, no Buklog could succeed without gifts for the spirits and ancestors. These offerings were not mere tokens. They were symbols of gratitude, respect, and the eternal bond between the human world and the unseen. On a simple altar woven from bamboo, the Balian arranged rice, betel nut, jars of pangasi, and a live chicken. She chanted songs as she worked, her voice carrying across the clearing like wine through the trees. Children watched in silence, sensing the weight of the moment. The Balian explained that each item carried meaning. Rice for life, betel nut for friendship, wine for joy, and the chicken as a messenger whose spirit would carry their prayers upward. When she tied red and yellow threads around the altar, it was not just decoration, but a spiritual thread that connected the people to the divine. The villagers participated in their own ways. Each family contributed bundles of food or jars of drink. Even the poorest gave something, for the Buklog was not about wealth, but about unity. No gift was too small. A handful of rice carried the same weight of sincerity as a full jar of wine. Children brought tiny baskets of fruit or root crops, proud to know that their effort too mattered. In the evenings, as preparations neared completion, the village gathered to sing. Bamboo flutes played soft melodies, drums kept steady rhythms, and voices rose in songs of thanks and anticipation. The clearing glowed with torches, shadows dancing on the half-finished platform, giving it an almost mystical aura. People smiled, laughed, and worked, but beneath it all was a deep reverence. The Subanen knew that the Buklog was not only a celebration of the harvest, but a renewal of their covenant with the spirits, a reminder that their lives were part of a larger sacred circle. By the time the moon grew full, Gumutan was ready. The platform stood tall, the offerings were prepared, and the people's hearts beat with the same rhythm as the drums that would soon thunder through the night. The Buklog awaited. The morning of the Buklog dawned with a special glow. The sun rose slowly above the misty mountains, casting golden light across the valleys, as if the heavens themselves were preparing for the great ritual. For days, news of Gumutan's Buklog had spread like fire through the surrounding forests and across the winding rivers. Subanen families from distant valleys, mountain ridges, and river villages prepared themselves, eager to join the celebration of Thanksgiving that bound all kin together. They came in many ways. Along the forest trails, long lines of families walked together, balancing baskets on their heads and carrying bundles of food and woven mats on their backs. Their colorful clothing stood out against the deep greens of the forest, each bright thread shining with the pride of their craft. Some families paddled canoes down the rivers, their paddles dipping in perfect rhythm, sending ripples across the water. From far away, the sound of drums and gongs guided them toward Gumutan like a beacon. The journey was not a burden, but a celebration in itself. Along the trails, children laughed and sang songs, their voices echoing beneath the tall trees. Hunters pointed out deer tracks, teaching the young to read the language of the forest even as they traveled. Women shared food as they walked, passing roasted bananas, boiled cassava, and strips of dried meat from basket to basket. Whenever the group rested near a stream, they refreshed themselves, washing their faces in the cool waters and whispering short prayers to the river spirits for safe passage. The closer they came to Gumutan, the more their anticipation grew. The Subanen did not see this journey as travel to another village, but as a return to family. For the Buklog belonged to everyone. It was not Gumutans alone, but a celebration that tied the whole people together. By the time they heard the first faint sounds of Kalintang gongs and drums drifting through the trees, their hearts quickened. The gathering place was near, and so was the joy of reunion. By mid-morning, Gumutan was alive with movement. From every direction, people arrived in waves, a living river of humanity flowing into the central clearing. The air filled with the sounds of greetings, shouts of recognition, laughter, and the rhythmic beat of drums echoing in welcome. Children, who had never before seen so many faces in one place, ran in circles with wide-eyed wonder, weaving between the legs of adults. Each arriving family carried gifts, for the Buklog was a time of sharing abundance. Some brought baskets overflowing with rice, carefully tied with woven strips of palm. Others carried jars of freshly fermented Pangasi wine, their clay surfaces cool and damp from the river journey. Women brought bundles of vegetables, coconuts, and sweet fruits wrapped in banana leaves. Weavers displayed cloth dyed in vivid reds, yellows, and greens, folded neatly and offered as tokens of kinship. Hunters carried dried venison, smoked wild pig, or freshly caught fish strung together with rattan vines. Every gift, no matter how large or small, was received with gratitude, for it represented care, effort, and unity. As the gifts piled high near the Buklog platform, the clearing transformed into a living tapestry of Subanen abundance. The colors of food, cloth, and baskets mixed with the movement of people until the place seemed to shimmer with life. The Balian moved among the families, offering blessings with soft chants and sprinkling water mixed with herbs to purify their arrivals. Elders greeted one another with warm embraces, exchanging stories of harvests, hunts, and journeys. For many, this was the first time in months, or even years, that distant relatives and friends met again. It was more than a festival. It was a reunion, a renewal of bonds that stretched beyond villages and valleys. The Buklog did not belong to Gumutan alone. It belonged to all who carried Subanen blood, all who honored the spirits, and all who remembered the ancestors. The arrival of villagers turned the once quiet clearing into a living sea of voices, colors, and joy. By noon, Gumutan's clearing could hardly contain the multitude of people who had gathered. Hundreds stood shoulder to shoulder. The village transformed into a vast open city of bamboo and cloth. Smoke from cooking fires curled into the air, carrying the scent of roasting meat and steaming rice. The beat of Kalintang gongs rang out louder now, joined by drums and bamboo flutes. Music filled every corner, weaving itself into conversations, laughter, and greetings. Children darted fearlessly through the throng, carrying messages, chasing each other, or delivering small baskets of food to the growing altar. Women sat in groups, weaving while they talked, their hands never idle. Men inspected the Buklog platform, testing its strength with stomps and cheers, proud of the work that had gone into raising it. Elders sat beneath the shade of great trees, their voices telling stories to any who would listen. Tales of past Buklogs, heroic hunts, and ancient leaders whose wisdom still guided the people today. Everywhere there was life. Families embraced after long separations. Young men and women, dressed in their finest woven cloth, stole glances at each other through the crowd, shy smiles passing like secret gifts. Warriors of the Megalong greeted one another with firm grips, proud to stand shoulder to shoulder in defense of their people. The Balian, moving gracefully, reminded all that their gathering was not merely human, but also spiritual. She raised her arms toward the sky, chanting prayers to invite the unseen guardians to join the celebration. The arrival of villagers was more than a physical gathering. It was the creation of a living tapestry of Subanen identity. Each thread, every family, every gift, every song was woven into the greater fabric of unity. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the clearing was no longer a single village, but a vast community of one people, ready to begin the sacred ritual. The Buklog was no longer a promise in the future. It was alive, breathing, and waiting for the thunder of the people's feet upon the trembling platform. The moment had finally come. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm golden glow over the forest, the clearing of Gumutan pulsed with life. At the center stood the Buklog platform, rising proudly on its towering stilts. It was more than wood and rope. It was the heart of the celebration, a living bridge between the world of the people and the realm of the spirits. For weeks, hands had labored to raise it. Now it stood ready, trembling faintly as the first footsteps approached. The Timuay, standing tall beside the Balian, raised his hand to signal the start. The crowd fell silent, anticipation heavy in the air. Then, with a single booming strike of the gong, the Buklog began. The first dancers stepped onto the platform, their movements firm, their feet stamping in rhythm with the drums. The wooden floor quivered under their weight, sending vibrations down through the stilts, into the earth, and outward into the world unseen. To the Subanen, these tremors were not accidents of wood and soil. They were messages reaching deep into the spirit realm to announce their gratitude and joy. Soon, dozens of men and women joined, their bodies moving in harmony. The platform shook with a steady thunder, echoing through the valley. Each stomp was a prayer, each rhythm a heartbeat shared by all. Children clapped from below, their eyes wide as they felt the vibrations under their bare feet. Elders smiled, remembering Buklogs of long ago, when they too had danced with the vigor of youth. The Balian chanted softly at the edge, her voice weaving through the music like smoke, guiding the spirits toward the gathering. The air filled with sound, Kalintang gongs clashing in bright patterns, bamboo flutes releasing soft melodies, drums pounding like rolling thunder. Yet in the midst of this noise, there was no chaos. It was a woven harmony, a living song of the Subanen people. The Buklog had awakened. The celebration was no longer preparation. It was alive, powerful, and unstoppable. The Buklog was more than spectacle. It was communion. As more people climbed onto the platform, the rhythm grew stronger, yet never broke. The dancers moved as one body, stamping their feet in perfect time. The trembling of the stilts was not just vibration. It was energy flowing through everyone, binding them together in spirit. The Subanen believed that when their feet shook the earth, their ancestors felt it, and the unseen guardians were pleased. Young men danced with fierce pride, their steps heavy and forceful, each stomp echoing with strength. Beside them, women swayed gracefully, their arms moving like flowing rivers, balancing the thunder of the men with gentleness. Children were lifted onto the platform, encouraged to join, their small feet adding light patters to the mighty rhythm. In this way, no one was excluded. The Buklog welcomed all, from the youngest to the oldest, weaving them into one great circle of life. From below, families watched with awe, cheering and clapping in rhythm. Some struck bamboo sticks together, adding sharp beats that blended with the music. Others sang chants, repeating phrases that told stories of old battles, harvests, and victories over famine. Every voice, every sound became part of the celebration. The platform groaned, but did not falter. The builders had crafted it with care, binding it with the strength of wrought tan and the wisdom of tradition. Each tremor carried into the earth like a living drumbeat, echoing far into the valleys and rivers beyond. To distant spirits, it was a signal. The Subanen were united, grateful, and strong. In the heart of the dance, the Balian's chant rose higher, her hands raised to the sky. She called upon the spirits of water, forest, and mountain, asking them to bless the people. As the dancers stomped harder, the air seemed to thicken with unseen presence. Some claimed they felt cool breezes on their faces though no wind blew. Others swore they glimpsed shadows moving gracefully between the trees. Whether real or imagined, the people believed the spirits had come, and belief was enough to bind their world to the other. As the sun slid into the horizon and painted the sky in fiery reds and purples, the Buklog grew only louder. Torches were lit, their flames flickering against the night, casting long shadows that danced across the clearing. The music did not stop. It surged with renewed energy, the gongs clashing like lightning, the drums roaring like thunder. The Subanen knew that the Buklog was not a short ritual. It was a celebration that lasted through the night, sometimes for days, carrying joy and faith without pause. Food was shared in abundance. Families passed around steaming bowls of rice, roasted wild pig, boiled root crops, and sweet fruits. Clay jars of Pangasi wine were opened, their sour-sweet fragrance filling the air. Drinking together was not for drunkenness, but for unity, a reminder that they all drank from the same life. Laughter rolled across the clearing as elders toasted to long life. Hunters toasted to bountiful forests, and farmers toasted to fertile fields. Even as people ate and rested, the Buklog platform did not fall silent. Groups took turns dancing upon it, ensuring that its tremors never ceased. Children fell asleep in their mother's arms, lulled by the pounding rhythm that never faded. Warriors watched the edges of the forest, guarding the festival with proud vigilance, their spears catching the glow of the firelight. For though Gumutan was safe, the Subanen knew that joy was always worth protecting. By midnight, the celebration had become something beyond human. The sound of hundreds of feet striking the platform seemed to merge with the heartbeat of the earth itself. The clearing glowed with torchlight and faith, alive with stories, songs, and dances. Time no longer mattered. Only unity, only gratitude, only the living bond between people, ancestors, and spirits. As the Buklog pulsed with dance and music, another equally important ritual unfolded at the edge of the clearing. The Balian and her assistants moved with solemn grace, preparing the sacred offerings that would soon be presented. To the Subanen, joy was never complete without gratitude, and gratitude had to be expressed not only with words, but with gifts, gifts meant for the unseen guardians who watched over their lives. The offerings were not mere objects. Each one was chosen with deep meaning. Freshly harvested rice, polished until it gleamed, was placed in woven baskets as a symbol of life and sustenance. Root crops like yam and taro were washed carefully and laid beside fruits picked at their ripest. The hunters contributed slices of wild boar and deer, while the fishermen brought gleaming river fish still smelling of the waters. To these, jars of Pangasi wine were added, their clay surfaces cool and damp in the night air. Each item carried the essence of the community's labor, proof that their blessings were not theirs alone, but were shared with the spirits. The Balian sprinkled the food with herbs and oils, murmuring chants as she worked. Every motion was precise, every sound deliberate. Children watched in awe, silenced by the gravity of the moment. Even the drumming seemed to soften, as if the people instinctively knew this was not just a feast, it was communion. Finally, the offerings were arranged on a low wooden table draped in woven cloth. The baskets of rice sat in the center, glowing faintly under the torchlight. Around them, meat, fruits, and wine formed a circle, symbolizing balance and wholeness. The Balian lifted her hands toward the sky, calling on the spirits to come, to see, and to partake. Her voice carried above the music, weaving through the clearing, echoing into the forest. And though invisible, the people believed the spirits were listening, ready to walk among them. When the offerings were prepared, the Balian stepped forward, her face painted with patterns of ash and earth. The dancers on the Buklog slowed their rhythm, allowing silence to seep into the night. All eyes turned to her, for this was the heart of the ritual. With her staff raised high, she began the invocation. Her chants were not spoken in ordinary words, but in the sacred tongue passed down through generations. They rose and fell like waves, at times sharp and commanding, at times soft as whispers. She called upon the guardians of the mountains, the keepers of rivers, the protectors of the forest, and the ancestors whose blood still flowed in their veins. The fire crackled, the drums beat gently, and the entire clearing seemed to breathe with her. The people bowed their heads. Some closed their eyes, feeling the hairs on their arms rise as the air thickened with unseen presence. The Subanen believed that at such moments the boundary between worlds grew thin. The spirits stood beside them, unseen but near, tasting the smoke, hearing the chants, and feeling the pounding of the Buklog under their feet. The Balian lifted a bowl of rice and wine and poured a portion onto the ground. This act of feeding the earth was one of the most sacred gestures. By offering the first taste to the soil and the spirits dwelling within it, the people affirmed their humility. Nothing they had was theirs alone. It all came from the world beyond. As the ritual continued, the villagers joined their voices in a low hum, a chant that vibrated like the beating of many hearts. The Buklog trembled again, not with dance this time, but with the collective energy of belief. For the Subanen, this was the true power of the offerings, not the food itself, but the unity of faith that gave them strength. After the invocation, the Balian placed her staff upon the ground and declared the offerings accepted. A great cheer rose from the villagers, their relief and joy spilling into laughter and song. They believed the spirits had eaten, not with mouths, but with essence. The food on the table would remain, but its spirit had already been taken, carried into the unseen world as a gift of gratitude. Now came the moment everyone awaited, the blessings. The Balian raised her voice, announcing the wishes granted by the spirits. Fertile fields that would yield plentiful harvests, rivers full of fish, forests teeming with game, protection from sickness, and long lives for the children. The villagers erupted into cries of joy. For them, these blessings were as real as the food they ate and the land they tilled. The offerings were then shared among the people. Families lined up to receive small portions of the rice, fruits, and meat. To eat of the offerings was to partake in the blessings themselves, carrying the Spirit's favor into their bodies. Children were given first, their laughter ringing through the night as they tasted the sacred food. Elders followed, their faces glowing with satisfaction, before the rest of the community joined in. The Pangasi wine was passed around, each sip sealing the bond between humans and spirits. As the people ate, the music surged back to life. The drums roared, the gongs clashed, and the Buklog platform thundered once more under dancing feet. The festival continued, now charged with even greater energy, for the people knew they were not alone. The spirits had come, had accepted, and had blessed. Through food, chant, and dance, the Subanen reminded themselves of the oldest truth, that life was never lived in isolation. It was always shared between people, between nature, and between the living and the unseen. And as long as they kept offering, the harmony of Gumutan would never be broken. As the moon climbed higher into the velvet night, the great clearing where the Buklog stood slowly shifted from the thunder of drums to the calm of storytelling. The villagers, their hearts full of dance and offerings, began to gather around the fires scattered across Gumutan. Torches flickered in the dark, sending shadows leaping across bamboo walls and trees, but the largest fire burned in the very center. Its crackling warmth drew everyone close, young and old, until a wide circle was formed, glowing orange under the night sky. For the Subanen, this moment was as sacred as the rituals themselves. Dance and offerings connected them to the spirits, but stories connected them to each other. No one in the village was too poor, too young, or too old to listen. Even the hunters who had earlier roared with laughter over their catches now sat cross-legged, quiet as children. Mothers hushed the little ones, drawing them close into their arms. The elders took their places nearest the flames, their weathered faces reflecting the firelight, their eyes deep pools of memory. The Balian, who had led the rituals, now sat silently, her role transformed. The duty of this hour belonged to the Timuay and the storytellers, those who carried within them the living archive of the people. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation. Everyone knew that the words spoken tonight would not be mere entertainment. They would be lessons, warnings, blessings, and laughter woven together. They were the pulse of tradition, the rope that bound the youngest child to the oldest ancestor. The first voice to rise belonged to Datu Angleman, one of the eldest men of the community. His voice, low and gravelly, floated across the fire. He began with the phrase every child loved to hear. Long ago, when the earth was young. Immediately, the circle leaned closer. The crackle of the fire blended with his words as the night deepened, and the world of Gumutan opened into worlds of gods. Heroes and ancient trials. Datu Angleman's first story spoke of the Great Flood, a tale passed from elder to elder. He told how long ago, when humans became greedy and forgot to honor the spirits, the rivers rose and swallowed the valleys. Mountains became islands, and only those who clung to the highest peaks survived. From these survivors, the Subanen traced their lineage. Each time he paused, the fire hissed, as if echoing his warning. Forget respect, and the world itself will rise against you. The children listened wide-eyed, their imaginations painting pictures of towering waters and trembling forests. But the elders nodded knowingly, for to them the flood was not only myth, it was memory, a truth carried in their blood. The story taught balance, humility, and the importance of offering thanks. Another tale followed, this one about Gumutan the Brave, a warrior ancestor said to have fought not with strength alone, but with cunning. In the story, Gumutan faced a giant serpent that terrorized the valley. Instead of trying to kill the beast with brute force, he listened to the whispers of the forest. Birds guided him to herbs that weakened the serpent. The river showed him stones that glowed in the dark. Using these gifts, he outsmarted the creature and drove it away. Strength alone, Datu Angleman declared, is never enough. It is wisdom and harmony with the world that bring true victory. The young men of the village sat straighter at these words, their pride stirred, while the women smiled knowingly. Every tale had layers: courage for the youth, patience for the grown, wisdom for the old. Even the hunters and farmers took lessons. Respect nature, work with it, not against it. As the night deepened, others took turns telling stories. Women sang ballads of forgotten daughters who became stars in the sky. Hunters told tales of spirits that guided or punished them in the forest. Each voice was different, but together they wove a single tapestry, the identity of the Subanen. The fire burned lower, its flames collapsing into glowing embers, but still the circle remained. No one wished to leave, for this was more than an evening pastime. It was the classroom of the ancestors. Through stories, the Subanen children learned not only who they were, but also how they must live. From tales of floods, they learned humility before nature. From the deeds of Gumutan the brave, they understood that wisdom was greater than violence. From songs of daughters turned into stars, they saw that sacrifice and love endured beyond death. The elders' voices were the bridge across time, carrying knowledge that no book could ever hold. As the final story ended, silence lingered. The crackle of the embers filled the air, and then slowly, a deep hum rose from the circle. It was not a song of words, but a vibration, a shared heartbeat of the people. Mothers rocked their children to sleep against their shoulders, while men leaned on their spears, eyes glowing with thought. The Timuay finally spoke. These stories are not just for tonight. They are for your days to come. When the rains are heavy, remember the flood. When you face trouble, remember Gumutan. When you love, remember the daughters who became stars. His words fell into the hearts of all, like seeds waiting to grow. And so, under the watch of the moon and the stars, the village of Gumutan sealed another night of memory. The children carried the stories into their dreams, and the elders carried them deeper into their bones. Firelight faded, but the lessons endured, woven into the soul of the Subanen, as eternal as the mountains that sheltered them. Among the Subanen, kinship was not just a matter of bloodlines. It was the very foundation of existence. To be born into Gumutan was to inherit an entire web of relationships that stretched far beyond one's immediate parents and siblings. A child belonged not only to a mother and father, but to the whole community. Uncles, aunts, cousins, and even neighbors were part of the same living net. To address someone as uncle or aunt did not always mean biological relation. It meant respect, inclusion, and belonging. This broad sense of family ensured that no child was ever alone, no elder forgotten, no widow abandoned. From the very first cry of a newborn, the village recognized the child as their collective responsibility. When a mother went to the river to fetch water or worked in the fields, another woman nursed her child without hesitation. If a father died in a hunt, his brothers or cousins stepped in to raise his children as their own. Bonds of kinship were fluid and flexible, growing where needed, stretching to cover every gap, ensuring that no soul was left unsupported. Marriage further strengthened this network. When a young man married, he did not just take a wife. He tied himself to her family, her kin, her ancestors. This bond created bridges between clans, weaving separate threads into one sturdy fabric. Disputes between families could be healed through such unions, turning former rivals into allies. The village's peace was guarded not only by the Timuay, but by the thousands of invisible threads of kinship tying one heart to another. The Subanen believed that life was too fragile to be lived in isolation. Illness, famine, or disaster could strike at any time, and only together could they endure. Kinship was their shield against the uncertainties of the world, and through it, they thrived with a strength greater than any individual could possess. In Subanen society, kinship was not a passive bond. It came with duties and roles that each member was expected to fulfill. Parents were the first teachers, guiding their children in the ways of planting, weaving, hunting, and honoring the spirits. Yet uncles and aunts also played crucial parts: mentors, storytellers, advisors in times of confusion. Grandparents were regarded as living libraries, their words carrying the weight of countless seasons. Children were taught early that respect for elders was non-negotiable. To disobey an elder's guidance was seen not only as disrespect, but as a crack in the foundation of the entire kinship network. A child bowing to an elder, offering food before eating, or fetching water without being asked was not mere custom. It was training for the greater responsibility of maintaining harmony. Marriage, too, carried its duties. A man was expected to protect, provide, and respect his wife, while a woman was expected to nurture, organize, and keep harmony in the household. But these were not rigid roles of dominance. Rather, they were complementary halves, each necessary for balance. If a man failed his duties, his kin corrected him. If a woman faltered, her kin guided her. Responsibility was shared, and correction was done not with harshness, but with collective care. Festivals and rituals became moments when these roles were celebrated. During Buklog, families sat together not by chance, but by design. Clans gathered in distinct groups, each showing pride in their lineage. Songs were sung to honor ancestors, recounting names and deeds, reminding children of the shoulders upon which they stood. Kinship was history, identity, and obligation all at once. Thus, the family in Subanen life was not a closed circle, but an expanding ripple. Its power came from the way each member upheld their role, so that together they formed a structure as strong as bamboo, bending, never breaking. What truly set the Subanen apart was how kinship shaped not only their homes, but their entire community. Disputes, which might destroy other villages, rarely turned violent here, because kinship provided bridges of reconciliation. If two families clashed, the Timuay reminded them, "You are bound, not divided. To harm each other is to harm yourselves." With this wisdom, grudges softened, pride yielded, and peace was restored. Kinship also served as the safety net in times of hardship. When floods destroyed fields or sickness spread, families pooled resources. A household with plenty shared with one in need, knowing that tomorrow the roles could be reversed. Generosity was not a favor. It was an expectation, born from the truth that all were kin in one way or another. Even rituals of death were infused with kinship. When someone passed away, it was not only their blood relatives who mourned, but the whole village. Women wailed in unison. Men carried the coffin. Children brought offerings. Through collective grief, they reminded one another that death did not sever bonds. It merely shifted them from the visible to the invisible. Ancestors remained kin, watching over the living, guiding them through dreams and signs. And so, the Subanen way of kinship was not just about family. It was about weaving the community into one body, one spirit. Each member was a vital part of a larger whole. Each life a thread in a fabric too strong to tear. The Buklog might be the heartbeat of celebration, but kinship was the breath that kept the Subanen alive. It was their invisible fortress, their unseen shield, their greatest inheritance passed from one generation to the next. For the Subanen, the land was not just a place to live. It was a teacher, a provider, and a sacred entity that demanded respect. Mountains, rivers, forests, and valleys were considered alive, inhabited by spirits who watched over the people and responded to their actions. From a young age, children were taught that every plant, every animal, Every flowing river carried a story and a responsibility. They learned to see the forest not as a resource to take freely, but as a partner in life whose gifts must be accepted with gratitude and care. The rice paddies, shimmering in the sunlight, were perhaps the clearest example of this philosophy. Farmers carefully tended their fields, keeping water levels balanced and ensuring young shoots were not trampled. They spoke softly to the earth as they planted, whispering prayers that the spirits might guide the water, the sun, and the rain. When pests or disease threatened, remedies were drawn from the forest itself. Herbs known to calm the soil, leaves and barks with protective powers, all learned through generations of observation. Even weeds were sometimes left, as it was believed that they were sent to teach patience or protect weaker plant from harm. Rivers, too, were central to daily life and spiritual practice. Men paddled canoes with respect, never throwing trash or unnecessary waste into the water. Fishing was done carefully. Nets and traps were designed to leave enough fish for the next season, and offerings of rice or betel nut were cast into the current to honor the river spirits. A young Subanen might spend hours at the water's edge, watching fish glide past, learning their rhythms, listening to the subtle language of currents and wind. Every ripple, every bird call, every rustle of the leaves held meaning and guidance. Even hunting and gathering were acts of balance. Hunters approached prey with quiet respect, speaking prayers to ask permission. If an animal was taken, nothing was wasted. Every part was used. Skins were made into clothing or mats, bones into tools, and meat shared across families. To kill without respect, or to take more than needed, was believed to anger the spirits and bring misfortune. Harmony with nature was not merely a belief, it was practical wisdom. It ensured food, shelter, and safety while teaching moral values, patience, gratitude, and humility. Every child raised in Gumutan knew that the forest and rivers were alive with intelligence and memory. To thrive, one must listen, observe, and act in balance. The forest was the classroom where lessons were learned daily. Young boys and girls were taken by elders on long walks into the dense woods. They learned to identify edible plants, track animals, and listen to subtle signs of weather changes. The whisper of leaves, the sudden silence of birds, the unusual movement of insects, all were signals with meaning. A child who could read the forest could predict rain, locate game, and find safety before disaster struck. Matt, a young boy of 10, once wandered deeper than his friends dared. As he knelt beside a stream to offer rice to the forest spirits, he noticed a fawn drinking nearby. The deer made no sudden movement, as if acknowledging his respect. In that moment, Matt understood an essential truth. Living in balance required humility and observation. The forest was not merely a provider. It was a teacher, a partner, and a guide. The boy carried this lesson home, sharing it with his family and receiving nods of approval from the elders. Even communal work reflected this harmony. Fields were rotated to prevent exhaustion of the soil, and trees were felled only when needed, with younger saplings planted in their place. Bamboo was harvested carefully, with only selected stalks taken, leaving the rest to grow. Hunting parties never overexploited a particular area, leaving animals to reproduce freely. Through these practices, the Subanen ensured sustainability long before modern concepts of ecology were known. The Balian emphasized these lessons spiritually as well. Before any major gathering or hunting trip, she led prayers to the forest, mountains, and rivers. She reminded villagers that every action had consequence. A careless hand might anger the spirits, but a respectful one would earn their favor. The forest was alive, watching, responding, and sometimes even guiding decisions, as it had done for generations of Subanen before. Harmony with nature was, therefore, the rhythm of life. Work and play, feast and fasting, ritual and rest, all flowed in balance with the land. Children learned early that respect for the earth was inseparable from respect for family, community, and ancestors. Perhaps the deepest lesson the Subanen learned was reciprocity. Life was a constant exchange between humans and nature. The forest gave food, wood, and medicine. The rivers gave water, fish, and transport. In return, humans were expected to act responsibly, to honor the unseen forces, and to give back whenever possible. This was not superstition, but a practical framework for sustainable living. During planting season, the first grains were offered to the spirits. During hunting trips, small portions of meat were left in the forest. During festivals, incense and prayers were dedicated to the mountains, rivers, and trees. These acts reinforced a continuous cycle of respect, gratitude, and sustenance. Even ordinary labor carried spiritual weight. Pounding rice, mending nets, or weaving mats was performed with mindfulness, recognizing that the hands of humans touched life, and life touched the hands in return. Farmers noticed subtle signs. A sudden gust might warn of rain, an unusual bird call might signal danger, and a healthy sprout symbolized ancestral favor. Every moment contained lessons. Every action was meaningful. The forest, the river, the fields, they were not resources to conquer, but partners to honor. This intimate, reciprocal relationship allowed the Subanen to survive, thrive, and celebrate life without depleting the land. It shaped their ethics, their stories, and their festivals, including the Buklog. Living in harmony with nature was more than a practice. It was the Subanen's identity. To walk respectfully through the forest, to fish wisely, to plant and harvest with gratitude, was to live as the ancestors had intended. It was to live fully, faithfully, and forever in balance. The Subanen did not measure time as modern cities do, with clocks and calendars, but through the cycles of the moon. Each month brought new rhythms, marking planting, harvest, and ceremonial life. The villagers of Gumutan watched the night sky carefully, noting the waxing and waning of the moon. A full moon illuminated the rivers and rice paddies, a sign of fertility and abundance. A crescent moon called for reflection, preparation, and quiet rituals of gratitude. Among these lunar observances, the moon of ripening rice was the most anticipated, as the green fields turned gold, signaling that the grains had matured. Families prepared for night-long festivals. Lanterns carved from bamboo were lit and hung from trees and bamboo poles, their soft glow reflected in the rippling water of the paddy fields. Children carried smaller lanterns, carefully walking along narrow dikes and pathways, casting a starry pattern upon the ground. Their laughter mingled with the rustling of leaves and the distant songs of night birds. The festival began with prayers led by the Balian. She called upon the river spirits to ensure irrigation remained plentiful and the soil fertile. She asked the forest spirits to protect the crops from pests and disease. And she implored the ancestors to bless the work of farmers, hunters, and weavers, acknowledging that every task in the community relied on cooperation. Families offered small bundles of rice, fruits, and flowers, placing them on the altar or on the ground as a gesture of thanksgiving. The air was thick with incense smoke and the fragrant aroma of freshly harvested grains. Music accompanied the celebration. Bamboo flutes whistled soft melodies. Drums beat the heartbeat of the village, and gongs punctuated the rhythm, signaling transitions between prayer, dance, and communal work. Every note, every stomp of the foot, every movement of the hands was both joyous and solemn. The Subanen believed that such celebrations aligned them with the natural and spiritual rhythms of the world. During the festival of ripening rice, no role was small or insignificant. Children learned early that every action mattered. They carried water to wash offerings, helped light lanterns, or swept the central clearing. Women prepared sweet rice cakes, wrapped in leaves and decorated with colorful patterns symbolizing fertility and prosperity. Men repaired fishing nets, sharpened hunting spears, and carried bamboo trays filled with fruits and vegetables. These contributions were not just chores. They were acts of devotion, lessons in interdependence, and demonstrations of respect for the cycles of life. The Timuay oversaw the organization of the festival, ensuring that every family knew its duties. Elders shared stories at strategic pauses, reminding the youth of the long history of the Subanen and their ancestors' dependence on the land and the moon. Their tales reinforced moral lessons: patience in planting, cooperation in harvesting, respect for the unseen, and humility in abundance. When a family failed to follow tradition or neglected offerings, it was not punished harshly, but reminded gently, emphasizing continuity and communal responsibility over personal failure. As night fell fully, dancing commenced. Men and women moved in coordinated circles, hands waving in symbolic gestures, feet tapping the ground in rhythm with the drums beneath. The young tried to imitate elders, learning subtle movements that carried meaning beyond mere aesthetics. Certain steps represented rain, others the bounty of the harvest, while others symbolized protection from spirits or the passing of blessings from ancestors to descendants. The dancers became living prayers, embodying gratitude, respect, and hope for continued prosperity. During the festival, feasting was communal. Everyone shared the newly harvested rice, roasted meats, and sweet fruits. Jars of Pangasi wine were opened, and even the smallest child received a taste. Sharing food reinforced the philosophy that abundance was communal, not individual. The moonlit rice paddies shimmered as families returned to their homes after the festival, carrying baskets filled with the harvest, hearts full of song, and spirits aligned with the rhythms of the cosmos. Another key lunar celebration was the Festival of First Fruits, a gathering of multiple villages to honor the earliest yield of crops. Each family contributed their finest vegetables, fruits, and grains, offering them to the Balian, who led prayers for continued abundance. The offerings symbolized gratitude, respect for ancestors, and acknowledgement of the cycles that sustained life. The village clearing became a mosaic of colors: golden rice, red fruits, green leaves, and clay jars glistening with Pangasi wine. Music and dance were central to this festival as well. Drums, flutes, and gongs synchronized with the stamping of feet on wooden platforms, echoing into the surrounding forests. Elders narrated stories that traced the origin of crops, the guidance of ancestors, and the spirits who had gifted knowledge to the Subanen. The children watched attentively, their eyes reflecting firelight, learning the ways of the past to carry into the future. Feasting was abundant, and sharing was enforced by tradition. Families offered portions to their neighbors, ensuring no one went hungry. This festival reinforced community solidarity, teaching that prosperity was not hoarded but multiplied through generosity. Children learned early that the first fruits of the season were sacred, and that the act of giving honored both human and spiritual worlds. The festivals of the moon were more than celebrations. They were the heartbeat of Subanen life. They synchronized human effort with natural rhythms, linked past generations with present actions, and solidified community bonds. Through music, dance, prayer, and shared food, the Subanen demonstrated that living in harmony with the cosmos was both a responsibility and a joy. After the festivals of the moon had ended and the fields had begun to settle into quiet order, the villagers of Gumutan turned once again to the old ritual of storytelling. The central fire, larger than most household hearths, was stoked and surrounded by families eager to listen. For the Subanen, these tales were more than entertainment. They were the living memory of the people, the instruction manuals of life, and the thread that connected each generation to those who came before. The elders sat closest to the fire, their faces etched with wrinkles that held centuries of knowledge. The children gathered at their feet, eyes wide, fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. Mothers and fathers crouched behind them, attentive, sharing knowing glances as the first stories unfolded. Each tale was meticulously chosen, carrying wisdom, courage, or warning. In the warm, flickering light, the past was made vivid, almost tangible, as the voices of ancestors seemed to rise from the embers themselves. Dada Luntien, one of the most respected elders, began with a story of the great river spirits. Long ago, he said, the rivers did not flow in calm tranquility. Instead, they roared with fury, reshaping valleys and swallowing villages. The ancestors of the Subanen had to learn respect for these waters, observing their moods, listening to their signs, and offering tributes to ensure safe passage. The story described the painstaking care with which they navigated rapids, carried canoes over shallow rocks, and sought guidance from the Balian. Each detail reminded the listeners that survival depended on humility, patience, and a deep connection with the natural and spiritual world. The children were spellbound. They imagined the turbulent waters, the ancestors paddling bravely against the current, and the spirits of fish and river guardians observing every move. For them, the story was a living lesson in balance, preparation, and respect. Data and Chien paused frequently, letting the suspense build, and then imparted the moral. To live well, you must honor the world around you, for it sustains and judges every step. Next came tales of heroes who embodied the qualities the Subanen valued most: courage, wisdom, and reverence for life. One story recounted the adventures of Sanjit, the hunter. Sanjit was renowned not merely for his skill in tracking, but for his cleverness in solving conflicts between neighboring villages. A giant wild boar had once terrorized the region, destroying fields and threatening lives. Many hunters attempted to kill it, but Sanjit approached with strategy rather than brute force. He studied the creature, observed its habits, and created traps that used the natural landscape to guide the boar in a safe capture. Along the way, he consulted elders, sought the counsel of spirits through the Balian, and offered prayers for guidance and forgiveness. When he finally succeeded, he did not boast of victory. Instead, he shared the meat with every village, honored the forest spirits for guidance, and reminded people that true strength was measured not in power, but in thoughtfulness and restraint. Stories like this reinforced communal values. Young boys understood that hunting was not a license for recklessness, but a sacred duty, requiring respect for both prey and place. Young girls learned that wisdom and courage could be expressed in many ways, from negotiating disputes to leading rituals. These narratives emphasized that every person had a role, every action had consequence, and every life was intertwined with the rest of the community and the natural world. Even the elders spoke in tones that suggested these lessons applied not only to children, but to all ages. Every tale, while thrilling, carried moral weight, teaching the community to value life, honor agreements, and seek balance in all endeavors. As the fire crackled and sparks drifted into the night sky, listeners felt the presence of ancestors guiding them through stories. Finally, the elders told stories of subtle wisdom rather than heroic deeds. These were narratives of everyday life, of women weaving mats that symbolized family unity, of hunters leaving small offerings to forest spirits, of rivers that required attentiveness to navigate safely. Each story, no matter how small, was a lesson in ethics, observation, and mindfulness. The Subanen believed that telling a story was an act of reciprocity. By recounting the deeds of ancestors, the living honored the dead. By listening, children and adults alike absorbed the guidance of generations past. These stories were, in essence, instructions for life. How to hunt, farm, love, parent, and live in harmony with the seen and unseen world. Sometimes, the elders would combine storytelling with ritual. They might toss herbs into the fire, letting smoke curl around the circle, or chant softly while recounting deeds of the past. Children learned that the act of listening itself was sacred, and that knowledge gained in this way carried weight beyond the immediate moment. Through the firelight, the village of Gumutan understood that history was not just a record of events, but a living, breathing guide. The spirits of the ancestors were present in each word, each pause, each moral of the tale. And the young knew that one day, they too would sit beside the fire, carrying forward these lessons, weaving the past into the present, and ensuring that the golden days of the Subanen would endure. Among the Subanen, craft was more than labor. It was a language, a spiritual practice, and a form of storytelling. Women's hands, skilled from years of practice, transformed simple fibers into intricate mats, baskets, and cloth. Each pattern carried meaning. Geometric lines represented rivers and paths. Spirals symbolized growth and renewal, and diamond shapes echoed the eyes of ancestors watching over the village. Children watched closely, their small fingers tracing threads under the patient guidance of mothers, aunts, and grandmothers. Weaving was done not in haste, but with intention. As women worked, they sang quietly or hummed ancestral songs, believing that the spirit of the pattern would be strengthened by their mindfulness. Every loop and knot was an offering, a prayer to the spirits of the forest, the river, and the household. The finished mats were not just functional. They were vessels of cultural memory, carrying blessings into daily life. Baskets, too, held significance. They were used to carry rice, fruits, fish, and gifts for ceremonies. But each weave reflected the artisan's attention to balance and harmony. Beginners learned that a tight weave symbolized protection, while looser patterns allowed for growth and flexibility, teaching that craft mirrored life itself. These lessons passed seamlessly from one generation to the next, ensuring that the artistry and its underlying wisdom remained alive. The Balian often reminded young apprentices that their work connected them to ancestors and spirits alike. Craft was a ritual. Attentive hands, respectful heart, and steady rhythm created not only beauty, but spiritual resonance. A poorly made mat, she explained, disrupted the harmony of a household. A carefully woven basket, on the other hand, strengthened the link between human labor and divine blessing. Men, too, engaged in forms of craft, often combining skill with spiritual insight. Carving wood was a sacred task. Hunters and warriors carved masks, small figures, and utensils, each infused with protective qualities and symbolic meaning. Some figures represented ancestral spirits, intended to watch over the home or forest. Others depicted animals or mythological beings, honoring lessons passed through generations. Carving required patience, precision, and respect for the material. The artisan would often speak to the tree from which the wood came, asking forgiveness for taking its life and offering thanks for its sacrifice. Each cut was deliberate. Every curve was chosen to reflect balance between utility and aesthetics. Even tools were prepared with care. Sharpened blades were polished, and handles wrapped with natural fibers to ensure that human effort remained in harmony with the natural world. The process of carving was intertwined with ritual. Before starting a significant piece, the craftsman might place rice or betel nut beside the wood, whispering prayers to the forest spirits. Once completed, the object was often consecrated by the Balian, reinforcing its protective power. Young men learned that craft was not only a skill but a moral and spiritual exercise, teaching patience, responsibility, and the importance of aligning work with ethical principles. These crafts became more than objects. They were embodiments of lessons, bridges between generations, and tangible connections to a universe in which humans, spirits, and nature were inseparably linked. By creating with respect, care, and intention, the Subanen ensured that every tool, mat, or carved figure carried life and meaning. Even routine labor was infused with spiritual significance. Farming, hunting, fishing, and food preparation were not merely means of survival, but acts of devotion and community building. Rice was steamed carefully, meat roasted over open flames with respect, and root crops boiled until tender, each action performed with mindfulness. Meals were never taken for granted. Each bite was an acknowledgement of the labor and spirits that made sustenance possible. Children were integral to this process. They carried water, helped in weaving, cleaned tools, and observed every motion of adults. Through practice and observation, they absorbed lessons in rhythm, balance, and patience. Even mistakes were part of learning. Dropping rice, misweaving a mat, or misaligning a carving offered an opportunity to correct, reflect, and improve. The Balian often emphasized that craft and labor were forms of prayer. The pounding of rice echoed the pounding of the Buklog platform, linking everyday activity with ritual. The rhythm of work, whether in the fields, the forest, or the home, created a harmony that united the village. Labor was a gift to ancestors, to the spirits, and to the next generation. In Gumutan, life was never compartmentalized. Work was art, art was prayer, and every gesture carried intention. Through weaving, carving, and daily chores, the Subanen preserved their knowledge, honored their ancestors, and nurtured the land. The craft of life was a living testament to their values. Patience, respect, creativity, and interconnectedness with all that surrounded them. To the Subanen, the forest was more than a collection of trees, animals, and streams. It was a living, breathing teacher. From early childhood, every boy and girl learned to move silently through its dense undergrowth, to observe without disturbing, and to listen deeply to its subtle signals. The rustle of leaves, the direction of a bird's flight, the sudden silence of insects. All these were forms of communication. The elders explained that the forest spoke constantly, guiding those who could understand. One young boy, Amat, often accompanied the elders on foraging trips. The elders showed him how to identify medicinal herbs, differentiate edible plants from poisonous ones, and recognize the tracks of animals. They explained the importance of balance, taking only what was needed, leaving enough to ensure future abundance. Amat learned that a careless step, a snapped branch, or a thoughtless act could anger the forest spirits, while patience and respect earned their guidance and protection. The Balian often reminded children that the forest contained both visible and invisible life. Spirits lived in trees, rivers, stones, and even in the wind. These spirits were neither uniformly kind nor malevolent. They responded to the behavior of humans. To harm unnecessarily was to invite misfortune. To give thanks and tread lightly was to ensure safety and blessings. Rituals, small offerings, and quiet prayers accompanied all forest activities, reinforcing the sacredness of daily interactions with nature. The forest was also a place of education beyond survival. In its depths, children learned courage, observation, and creativity. They discovered how to craft traps without harming unnecessary wildlife, build shelters from bamboo and leaves, and move silently to avoid startling animals. The forest was a laboratory of life, teaching lessons that could not be learned in the village alone. The Subanen viewed the forest not as separate from human life, but as an inseparable part of it. Rivers provided water for rice paddies. Trees offered materials for houses, tools, and crafts. Animals provided food, clothing, and spiritual guidance. Every element had its place, its purpose, and its spirit. Hunting, gathering, and farming were therefore acts of dialogue, requiring awareness, reverence, and reciprocity. When hunters tracked game, they began with prayers and offerings, acknowledging that they were taking a life to sustain many. Taking too much, acting violently, or failing to honor the spirit of the prey was forbidden. Women gathering roots or herbs did the same, often singing soft songs to honor the spirits and maintain harmony. Even the simplest actions, a branch cut for firewood or a stone carried for construction, were performed mindfully with gratitude and care. One day, Amat witnessed a deer cautiously drinking from a stream he had approached silently and respectfully. The elder accompanying him explained that the spirits had recognized Amat's respect, allowing the animal to remain calm. Such experiences reinforced the understanding that the forest was alive, responsive, and deserving of reverence. Each encounter, small or large, became a lesson in humility, patience, and cooperation. The forest also served as a spiritual mirror. Seasons, animal behavior, and plant cycles reflected the rhythms of life. Observing these cycles taught the Subanen to anticipate floods, droughts, and changes in crop growth. The forest was simultaneously a protector, provider, and teacher, showing that life's balance depended on mutual respect between humans and nature. Beyond education and resource provision, the forest acted as the ultimate guardian of Gumutan. Dense groves and thorny undergrowth created natural boundaries against hostile forces. The Subanen knew which paths were safe and which required caution, often guided by the wisdom of elders and whispers of spirits. Even rivers and mountains were seen as protective agents, their strength intertwined with human observance of proper rituals. The Balian played a critical role in maintaining harmony with the forest. Before any major gathering, hunting expedition, or construction project, she led offerings of rice, betel nut, and Pangasi wine, ensuring the spirits would not be angered. She reminded villagers that neglecting these duties could result in accidents, poor harvests, or sickness. By practicing rituals, the community maintained not only physical safety, but spiritual equilibrium. The forest also reinforced lessons of generosity and respect. Amat observed the elder placing leftover food in a small clearing for forest creatures, a symbolic gesture of reciprocity. The Subanen believed that giving to nature ensured its continued cooperation and abundance. Every tree felled for a house was replaced with a sapling. Every catch from the river was balanced with offerings. Every trip into the forest was conducted with mindfulness. Through these practices, Gumutan flourished in a rare harmony between humans and environment. Children grew into adults who understood that survival was inseparable from reverence, wisdom, and ethical behavior. The forest taught patience, resilience, and respect. It provided sustenance, shelter, and guidance, and it ensured that the Subanen way of life continued in balance with the land, water, and spirits. In essence, the forest was both the classroom and the guardian, its lessons embedded into every aspect of daily life and communal celebration. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the clearing where the Buklog had taken place glowed under the soft orange and red hues of twilight. Fires were lit around the village, scattered like stars across Gumutan, their flames casting dancing shadows on bamboo walls and weaving mats hung for drying. The air smelled of roasted meat, boiled root crops, and the faint sweetness of fermented Pangasi wine, lingering from the day's celebration. Children, flushed from excitement, ran between clusters of adults, still buzzing with the energy of stomping on the Buklog platform and spinning in ritual dances. Families gathered close to the fires. Elders sat cross-legged, sharing the warmth of their bodies and the glow of the flames with younger generations. They spoke in low, melodic tones, retelling the day's events and reflecting on their deeper meanings. The Timuay, seated near the largest fire, observed quietly, a figure of calm authority amidst laughter, chatter, and the occasional playful squeal from children. In these moments, the village felt its heartbeat, not in the pounding of drums or stomping on wooden posts, but in the shared presence of its people, unified by labor, celebration, and mutual respect. Food was brought out in communal fashion. Earthen bowls held rice, fish, and roasted pork, while children carried trays of fruits and sweets. Every family offered a portion to their neighbors, reinforcing the lesson that no feast was complete without generosity. Sharing food symbolized harmony, sustenance, and gratitude. Each bite reminded villagers of the Buklog's deeper purpose, celebrating not only harvests and abundance, but the enduring connections between human effort, spiritual blessing, and the cycles of life. Stories flowed naturally in this atmosphere. Elders recalled past Buklogs, comparing the skill of dancers, the precision of platform builders, and the beauty of ritual offerings. Children listened with rapt attention, absorbing lessons of bravery, patience, and respect. Even simple conversations reflected communal values, weaving individual experiences into a shared narrative that strengthened kinship, respect for nature, and cultural continuity. Night deepened, and the village's pace slowed. Smaller fires burned in family clusters, illuminating faces and creating intimate spaces for reflection. It was during these hours that wisdom was transmitted most effectively. Parents spoke to children about their responsibilities, reminding them that the energy of the Buklog was not confined to the day, but continued in every respectful act afterward. Elders reflected on the performance of the Megalong warriors, praising their discipline and strength, and used it as a lesson for young boys about courage tempered by respect. Women discussed the precision of weaving, the harmony of communal cooking, and the importance of contributing to the greater good. Every conversation, every gesture reinforced the principles of kinship, reciprocity, and humility that underpinned Subanen life. The Balian moved quietly among the fires, offering blessings and guidance. She reminded the villagers that spirits observed all actions, not only the grand gestures during the Buklog, but also the simple acts of care, patience, and mindfulness. When children were restless, she encouraged them to reflect on the day, meditate on the harmony of the platform stomps, and imagine the vibrations reaching unseen ancestors and forest spirits. The night became a bridge between celebration and contemplation, grounding the community in both joy and reverence. Above, the sky was clear, stars reflected in the calm river like scattered jewels. The villagers of Gumutan often considered the heavens as silent witnesses to human deeds. The night after the Buklog was a sacred pause, a time when individuals contemplated their place in the universe. Every family, young and old, felt the weight and warmth of communal unity. Children leaned against parents, absorbing stories of ancestors and lessons of the day. Elders gazed at the stars, recalling past generations and imagining those yet to come. The Timuay occasionally spoke softly about the importance of balance between work and play, ritual and rest, human life and the natural world. Firelight danced across faces, flickering in rhythm with the collective heartbeat of the village. This night reinforced an essential truth of Subanen life. Strength lay not in wealth or weapons, but in unity, wisdom, and respect for the seen and unseen. The Buklog was over, yet its purpose endured, manifested in shared stories, silent prayers, laughter, and the quiet reflection under stars. Each soul understood that the rituals of the day were inseparable from daily life, that honor and reverence were continuous obligations, and that harmony with one another and with nature was the true treasure of Gumutan. As the fires slowly dimmed, the village slept, wrapped in the lingering warmth of celebration and the silent guidance of ancestors and spirits. In these hours, the golden days of the Subanen continued, not in grand gestures, but in the steady, sacred rhythm of daily life intertwined with memory, respect, and the eternal forest that surrounded them. Among the many stories that elders shared after the Buklog, those of Balian stood out for their depth and practical wisdom. He was a revered figure, celebrated not only for leadership, but for his ability to interpret the signs of nature and guide his people accordingly. Children listened with wide eyes as elders recounted how Balian had taught villagers to understand river currents, predict floods, and recognize patterns in the winds that signaled the coming of storms or the arrival of rains. One story told of a particularly harsh season when the rivers swelled beyond their usual boundaries and threatened to inundate entire villages. While others panicked, Balian calmly observed the patterns of the clouds, the movements of fish, and the behavior of riverbank trees. He directed families to higher ground and coordinated the construction of temporary shelters. Through his leadership, no life was lost, and the harvest that remained was saved. The lesson, elders explained, was clear. Wisdom required patience, observation, and deep connection with nature. Bravery alone could not save a village. Understanding the land, rivers, and skies was essential. Children learned that leadership was not about power or force, but about insight, foresight, and service to the community. Even the youngest listeners internalized this lesson, imagining themselves one day interpreting signs of nature and guiding their people with the calm authority of Balian. Equally captivating were the stories of Sanjit, the hunter, whose cunning and bravery symbolized balance between humans and nature. In one tale, Sanjit tracked a massive wild boar that had been destroying crops across multiple villages. Instead of confronting the animal recklessly, he observed its habits, traced its nightly movements, and devised a series of traps using bamboo and natural obstacles. When he finally captured the boar, Sanjit did not celebrate alone. He shared the meat with every affected family and held a ritual to honor the spirits of the forest that had guided his hands. Elders explained that the success of the hunt was not merely a matter of skill, but of humility and respect. Sanjit's actions taught that every life, human or animal, was valuable, and that taking it required gratitude, ceremony, and responsibility. Young listeners were particularly captivated by the cleverness of his methods. They learned the importance of observation, patience, and ethical decision-making. Even everyday tasks, planting rice, mending tools, or preparing food, could be approached with the same careful respect. Sanjit's story exemplified that heroism in Subanen culture was inseparable from morality, mindfulness, and a sense of duty to both people and a natural world. Other tales focused on subtler lessons: women weaving mats with intention, elders teaching respect for both the living and the unseen, and families practicing generosity and patience. Each story reinforced the notion that daily actions, no matter how small, contributed to communal harmony and spiritual balance. The Subanen believed that listening to these stories was an act of participation in ancestral guidance. By absorbing lessons of courage, respect, and foresight, the young were prepared to take on future responsibilities. Elders emphasized that stories were not merely past events. They were living instructions for present and future behavior. Every narrative carried ethical, spiritual, and practical wisdom, teaching that survival and prosperity depended on knowledge, moral conduct, and harmonious interaction with the natural and spiritual worlds. As the firelight flickered and embers glowed faintly in the night, villagers understood the weight of these stories. They were more than tales. They were a bridge across time, connecting generations, preserving traditions, and ensuring the golden days of the Subanen would endure. Children internalized lessons in courage, humility, and reverence, preparing them to become future leaders, hunters, artisans, and caretakers of the land and community. In this way, the tales of ancestors were continuously renewed, retold, remembered, and lived, forming the foundation of the Subanen way of life, where past, present, and future existed in harmonious dialogue. Among the Subanen, weaving was far more than a practical skill. It was an act of devotion and an embodiment of ancestral wisdom. Each mat, cloth, and basket told a story. Geometric patterns represented rivers, mountains, and celestial cycles, while spirals symbolized life, growth, and renewal. Elder women taught young girls to weave with intention, emphasizing that every knot carried both beauty and meaning. Weaving sessions were often accompanied by soft, rhythmic songs or chants. Women hummed melodies passed down for generations, believing that the vibrations infused the woven materials with spiritual energy. Children watched intently, learning both technique and the subtler aspects of practice: patience, attentiveness, and respect for materials. A miswoven mat was not seen as failure, but as an opportunity to teach discipline, mindfulness, and humility. Baskets, used to carry rice, fruits, fish, and ceremonial offerings, were equally important. Their patterns symbolized protection and abundance, and their construction demanded focus and skill. Beginners learned that tight weaving indicated carefulness and protection, while looser designs allowed for adaptability and growth, teaching that craft mirrored life itself. The act of weaving connected every generation, linking the present artisans to those who had come before and to the spirits that guided their hands. The Balian often reminded apprentices that weaving was a sacred practice. The process was a dialogue with ancestors and the spiritual world. Each motion, each measured rhythm, was an offering. By honoring the material, following patterns passed down through generations, and working with dedication, the Subanen ensured that their craft was infused with blessings and guidance. While women wove, men engaged in carving, another vital form of craft imbued with both practical and spiritual significance. Hunters and artisans carved masks, small figures, and tools. Each item served a purpose, from ritual protection to household utility, yet carried symbolic meaning. Figures representing ancestors, spirits, or sacred animals reminded families of values, duties, and connections to nature. Carving required patience, respect, and mindfulness. Craftsmen spoke to the trees from which they harvested wood, asking permission and offering thanks. Every cut and curve was deliberate, balancing practicality with aesthetics. Before beginning significant pieces, artisans made small offerings, rice, betel nut, or Pangasi wine, invoking spiritual protection and guidance. Once completed, the Balian often blessed these objects, reinforcing their role in safeguarding families, homes, and fields. Carving also taught ethical and moral lessons. Young men observed that speed alone did not yield mastery. Precision, intention, and respect mattered. Mistakes were corrected carefully, reinforcing patience and reflection. In Subanen culture, the process of creating carried as much importance as the finished product. Tools, masks, and figures were living reminders of ancestral guidance and spiritual awareness, embodying the principles of balance, respect, and harmony. Even routine labor, farming, hunting, fishing, and food preparation, was imbued with spiritual significance. Rice was steamed with care, meat roasted over open flames, and root crops boiled to perfection. Each act was performed mindfully, acknowledging the labor and spirits that sustained life. Meals were communal, emphasizing generosity, cooperation, and gratitude. Sharing reinforced the Subanen philosophy that abundance belonged to all, not just the individual. Children played active roles in these practices. They carried water, helped weave, cleaned tools, and observed elders, absorbing lessons in rhythm, coordination, and attention to detail. Mistakes were treated as opportunities to learn, teaching patience and humility. The Balian emphasized that the rhythm of daily work mirrored ritual practices. Just as the Buklog connected the community to spirits and ancestors, so did every act of labor, weaving a continuous link between human effort, natural cycles, and spiritual balance. In Gumutan, life was seamless. Craft, labor, and spirituality merged into a harmonious whole. Every woven mat, carved figure, and prepared meal was a testament to the Subanen's values: patience, respect, interconnectedness, and mindfulness. The craft of daily life was both functional and sacred, ensuring that traditions endured, the community thrived, and each generation inherited the wisdom and skills of the past. The moon of ripening rice was one of the most anticipated times in the Subanen calendar. As the rice fields reached their golden peaks, families prepared for celebrations that honored both the earth's bounty and the spirits that nurtured it. Villagers decorated homes and pathways with carved bamboo lanterns, their soft glow illuminating intricate designs. Children carried tiny lanterns into the fields, tracing the edges of rice paddies and creating a sparkling reflection that resembled stars fallen to earth. Music was an inseparable part of the festival. The resonant sound of gongs and the rhythmic beat of drums echoed through valleys, calling distant villages to join in the celebration. Bamboo flutes produced haunting melodies that intertwined with the natural sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, rustling leaves, and flowing rivers. The songs were both joyous and reverential, offering thanks for abundance and harmony while acknowledging the presence of unseen spirits. The Balian played a central role, leading prayers and distributing blessings. She guided offerings of rice, fruits, and Pangasi wine to honor river spirits, ancestors, and guardian deities. Each gesture was deliberate, ensuring that gratitude, respect, and spiritual reciprocity were clearly expressed. The villagers understood that neglecting these rituals could disrupt harmony, affect harvests, and invite misfortune. Through repeated participation, the young internalized the significance of timing, preparation, and attentiveness in all communal activities. Families contributed to preparations collectively. Women baked and steamed special treats. Men carried bamboo poles and lanterns, and children assisted in weaving or arranging offerings. The atmosphere was one of unity, where every individual's contribution, no matter how small, was recognized as essential to the success of the festival. The moon of ripening rice was a living classroom, teaching lessons in collaboration, patience, and the interdependence of all members of the community. Another prominent lunar celebration was the Festival of First Fruits, a time to express gratitude for the first yields of crops. Villagers brought their harvests to the central clearing, presenting them to the Balian, who then offered prayers and distributed blessings. Each item, whether a basket of rice, a bundle of vegetables, or a jar of fermented Pangasi wine, carried symbolic meaning. The first fruits represented not only sustenance, but also the cyclical connection between humans, spirits, and the land. Music and dance accompanied the ceremony. Men and women moved in synchronized patterns, hands weaving in the air as they circled the offerings. Children participated, learning the traditional steps and observing the elders' movements to internalize the symbolic gestures. The communal rhythm of movement, song, and celebration reinforced values of cooperation, respect, and continuity. Every stomp, every clap, every note of the gong reminded the participants that their lives were interwoven with one another and with the natural and spiritual worlds. During the Festival of First Fruits, elders shared teachings related to agricultural cycles, environmental stewardship, and ethical behavior. Stories of past leaders, heroic hunters, and wise women illustrated practical lessons. Planting with care, sharing abundantly, and maintaining respect for the unseen forces governing the land. Children understood that festivals were not mere entertainment. They were moral and spiritual instruction, reinforcing the principles that had sustained the Subanen for generations. The festival also served as a time to renew social bonds. Neighboring villages exchanged gifts, repaired fences together, and shared news and advice. The Balian emphasized that unity, generosity, and respect were as important as the physical offerings. Through this cyclical practice, the community remained resilient, cohesive, and spiritually attuned. That abundance, harmony, and cultural memory persisted. Lunar festivals were more than celebrations. They were the embodiment of the Subanen worldview. Observing the moon's cycles provided guidance for planting, harvesting, and timing rituals. Every moon marked a new opportunity to honor the spirits, sustain the land, and reinforce communal bonds. Participation in these festivals taught that every act, from the preparation of offerings to the final dance, carried meaning and consequence. Children learned through observation, participation, and subtle instruction. They saw how elders coordinated rituals, distributed blessings, and encouraged communal harmony. Young boys and girls internalized lessons of patience, respect, and rhythm, recognizing that physical actions, music, and ceremonial gestures were integrated expressions of spiritual and cultural values. Music, dance, and offerings created a multi-sensory experience that reinforced memory. The echo of drums, the shine of lanterns, and the aroma of cooked rice combined into a collective experience that impressed upon all participants the unity of life, labor, and ritual. The Balian emphasized that spiritual balance was maintained not only through prayer, but through conscious participation in each moment, reinforcing ethical conduct, humility, and gratitude. By the end of these celebrations, the Subanen community felt renewed in purpose, knowledge, and connection. They returned to daily life, enriched, carrying the lessons of the moon into farming, craft, family interactions, and environmental stewardship. Lunar festivals ensured that culture, spirituality, and practical wisdom flowed seamlessly from one generation to the next, preserving the golden days of the Subanen indefinitely. Weeks before the Buklog, the village of Gumutan transformed into a hub of coordinated activity. Preparation was an immense communal effort, requiring skill, dedication, and careful planning. Men ventured into the dense forests to select and fell hardwood trees for the construction of the Buklog platform. Each tree was chosen for its strength, straightness, and resonance. The elders emphasized the importance of speaking to the trees, offering thanks, and acknowledging the spirits dwelling within. This practice ensured harmony and was believed to imbue the platform with protective energy and spiritual power. Transporting these massive logs from the forest to the village was an act of collective strength. Villagers worked in teams, carrying, dragging, and balancing the heavy timber along narrow paths. The physical exertion was accompanied by chants and rhythmic calls, creating a shared pulse that synchronized effort and fostered unity. Women contributed by preparing woven mats, baskets, and ropes to secure the posts, while children assisted in smaller tasks, carrying bundles, or helping arrange offerings. Every individual, regardless of age or gender, had a meaningful role, demonstrating the Subanen principle that communal labor was inseparable from cultural and spiritual life. Beyond wood, the village gathered additional materials essential for ritual purposes. Bamboo poles were collected for percussion instruments and ceremonial scaffolding. Clay jars were prepared for storing Pangasi wine, while fresh rice, betel nuts, fruits, and other offerings were harvested and stored carefully. Women processed and dyed cloth in vibrant patterns to decorate the clearing, each design representing harmony, prosperity, or ancestral blessing. Every act of gathering, preparing, and organizing materials carried symbolic weight, reinforcing the sacredness of the forthcoming Buklog and the unity of Gumutan's people. The construction of the Buklog platform itself was a spectacle of coordination, skill, and spiritual significance. Hardwood posts were erected with precision, interlocking in a complex design that ensured stability and resonance. The elders supervised every step, ensuring that measurements, angles, and placements adhered not only to practical requirements, but also to symbolic meanings derived from ancestral teachings. The Balian instructed that alignment of posts and beams should correspond with celestial positions, the flow of rivers, and the direction of prevailing winds. As men worked, children observed and mimicked their movements, internalizing techniques that would become vital in future Buklogs. Women assisted by weaving mats for floor coverings, decorating posts with bright cloth, and arranging ritual offerings in preparation for the ceremony. The rhythmic pounding of posts and the careful tying of ropes resonated like a heartbeat, reinforcing the sacred connection between labor, ritual, and communal spirit. Every hammer, every pull, and every careful adjustment was performed with mindfulness, reflecting the Subanen belief that intentional action strengthens spiritual harmony. During construction, the elders reminded the villagers of the interconnectedness of all tasks. Preparing the platform was not solely physical labor. It was also a spiritual offering. Mistakes were addressed collectively, teaching lessons of patience, humility, and cooperation. The Balian often recited chants, calling upon river, forest, and ancestral spirits to bless the construction and ensure that the vibrations of the platform would echo with the prayers and unity of the community once the Buklog commenced. In parallel with physical construction, preparations for offerings demanded equal care. Rice, fruits, and small animals were selected for freshness and quality, symbolizing purity, abundance, and respect. Women meticulously cleaned, arranged, and presented each item in baskets or on mats, mindful that each offering carried spiritual significance. The Balian oversaw the arrangement, ensuring proper placement and timing, reinforcing the Subanen understanding that ritual order maintained harmony between the physical and spiritual worlds. Pangasi wine, a potent fermented drink, was brewed weeks in advance, stored in clay jars, and aged to perfection. The aroma of cooking rice and boiling roots filled the village, mixing with the earthy scents of the forest and river. Children helped by carrying small jars or assisting in minor tasks, learning that even the smallest contribution to the Buklog was valuable and recognized. Each action, whether weaving, carrying, or chanting, was part of sacred rhythm, linking labor to ritual and community unity. By the night before the Buklog, Gumutan was alive with anticipation and energy. Every log, mat, jar, and offering reflected months of preparation, communal effort, and spiritual devotion. The village understood that the Buklog was not merely a festival, but a manifestation of their values. Unity, respect for ancestors, reverence for spirits, and celebration of the interwoven cycles of life. As villagers rested, the forest seemed to hum softly, echoing the collective heartbeat of a people bound together by tradition, labor, and faith. On the morning of the Buklog, the village of Gumutan awaited the arrival of guests from distant valleys and forested mountains. Villagers traveled long distances, some on foot along narrow paths that wound through bamboo groves and thick forests, others by canoe, paddling along rivers that shimmered under the early sunlight. Each journey was a test of endurance, patience, and reverence, as travelers navigated terrain where the forest and river were alive with spirits, as much guardians as challenges. Families carried gifts in baskets balanced on their heads or strapped across their backs. Bundles of rice, fresh vegetables, woven mats, jars of Pangasi wine, and occasionally small animals for ritual offerings. The weight of these gifts was more than physical. It was a symbol of care, preparation, and respect for the host village, the ancestors, and unseen spirits. Along the trails, travelers sang softly, reciting chants learned from elders, asking for safe passage, and giving thanks for protection. Birds and insects joined the melodies, creating a living soundtrack of movement, anticipation, and spiritual alignment. Children, despite fatigue, ran ahead on winding paths or paddled excitedly in canoes, eager to glimpse the festival clearing. Elders guided them, emphasizing patience, observation, and humility. Every fallen branch, rushing stream, or sudden rustle in the foliage was a lesson in attentiveness and respect. The journey itself became a ritual, preparing the villagers mentally, physically, and spiritually for participation in the grand Buklog celebration. As travelers approached Gumutan, the sounds of gongs and drums from the clearing grew louder, announcing the presence of a gathering long before eyes could behold it. Families exchanged excited glances, sensing both joy and reverence. Smoke from cooking fires and the vibrant colors of hanging woven cloth signaled that the village was alive, fully prepared, and ready to welcome visitors. Upon entering the clearing, guests were greeted with warmth, laughter, and traditional songs. Children darted among elders, weaving through adults with shy curiosity or boisterous energy. Every gift, from a small jar of wine to a basket of rice, was received with gratitude and incorporated into ritual preparation. The Balian oversaw the arrangement of offerings, ensuring that each item was properly blessed and positioned according to custom. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Distant villagers shared news from their homes, stories of harvests, and the trials of their journey. Elders from multiple communities conversed, exchanging wisdom and advice, reinforcing social bonds, and preparing for joint participation in the ceremonial Buklog. This convergence was more than a gathering. It was a renewal of relationships, a reaffirmation of shared values, and a living demonstration of unity across valleys and forests. Beyond the physical arrival, the most important preparation was spiritual. Travelers spent moments in quiet reflection or small rituals, acknowledging the spirits of rivers, mountains, and ancestors. Before joining the larger celebration, families offered prayers at riverbanks, under ancient trees, or beside small shrines. The Balian reminded everyone that entering the clearing was entering a sacred space, where mindfulness, respect, and gratitude were as necessary as physical participation. Children observed the elders' actions carefully, noting how every gesture, chant, and arrangement carried deep meaning. They learned that arrival was not merely a logistical step, but a conscious entry into a communal and spiritual rhythm. Guests adjusted clothing, positioned gifts, and synchronized their presence with the collective energy of Gumutan, ready to contribute to the Buklog. By midday, hundreds had gathered. The clearing was a vibrant tapestry of color, movement, sound, and scent. The energy of travel, combined with anticipation and preparation, heightened the communal awareness that the Buklog was not a passive festival, but an active participation in culture, spirituality, and kinship. Every face, young and old, reflected eagerness, respect, and readiness for the ritual that would soon begin, marking the culmination of weeks of preparation, travel, and anticipation. At the center of the clearing stood the Buklog platform, towering, robust, and intricately constructed from interlocking hardwood posts. Its hollow logs hung beneath like massive drums, poised to echo the steps of hundreds of villagers. The Balian, adorned in colorful beads and feathers, moved gracefully around the platform, placing rice, betel nuts, jars of Pangasi wine, and small ceremonial items on the altar. Each gesture was deliberate, carrying prayers and intentions that linked the present with ancestors and spirits. Villagers began assembling around the platform in concentric circles. Men, women, and children positioned themselves according to age, role, and familial grouping. Elders instructed the younger generation, reminding them that their movements, chants, and offerings were as significant as the physical construction of the platform. The children watched with wide eyes, learning the subtleties of posture, timing, and respect. Every small action carried both practical and spiritual importance, reinforcing the communal understanding that the Buklog was a living bridge between human effort and divine presence. The rhythmic sound of gongs began to resonate, soft at first, then gradually growing in intensity. Drums punctuated the background, producing a heartbeat-like rhythm that filled the clearing and spilled into the surrounding forests. Birds seemed to pause mid-flight, and even the river appeared to shimmer more brightly, as if acknowledging the convergence of the community, spirits, and natural world. The Balian's voice rose in melodic chant, guiding the initial prayers and offerings, invoking blessings for the land, crops, families, and village. The entire gathering became a living, breathing entity, synchronized by song, movement, and shared intent. Before the platform itself would be used for the stomping and dances, smaller rituals marked the opening of the Buklog. Each family approached the altar, presenting offerings of rice, fruits, and small animals. The Balian blessed each contribution, whispering prayers that carried the gratitude and intentions of the giver toward the spirits of rivers, forests, and ancestors. These acts reinforced the Subanen understanding that reciprocity, respect, and mindfulness were necessary for both spiritual protection and the well-being of the community. The elders reminded everyone that the Buklog was not merely a celebration of abundance or artistry. It was a demonstration of harmony. Those who approached the platform with care and reverence were not only honoring the past, but participating in the creation of communal strength for the future. Every footstep, every chant, every gift contributed to the platform's spiritual resonance, ensuring the vibrations, blessings, and prayers reached both visible and invisible worlds. Music intertwined with ritual. Flutes produced haunting melodies while gongs and drums reinforced rhythm, creating layers of sound that mirrored the unity of purpose. Men stood ready to ascend the platform, prepared for the physical and spiritual experience of stomping on the hollow logs. Women distributed Pangasi wine, offering blessings to neighbors and children, integrating social reciprocity with ritual practice. The energy was electric yet sacred, embodying both exuberance and mindfulness in perfect balance. By mid-morning, the clearing had transformed into a tapestry of movement, sound, and spiritual presence. Children darted between circles of adults, learning through observation, laughter, and mimicry. Elders coordinated the sequence of rituals, ensuring that every act was aligned with ancestral teachings. Warriors skilled in the Megalong traditions positioned themselves strategically, observing both ceremony and safety, embodying a model of discipline and service. The Balian guided the final blessings before the first stomp would echo through the forest. She reminded all present that the Buklog was both celebration and offering, dance and prayer, artistry and devotion. The villagers absorbed her words, adjusting posture, gaze, and intent, preparing mentally, physically, and spiritually for the act that would unify the community in sound, movement, and devotion. As the first group climbed onto the platform, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The platform, massive and resonant, waited to carry the vibrations of feet, voices, and hearts into the earth and sky. Every eye, every ear, every breath was attuned to the imminent communion of humans, nature, and spirits. In this moment, Gumutan was not merely a village. It was a single living entity, vibrating in unity with centuries of tradition, ancestral wisdom, and the enduring presence of the Subanen way of life. With synchronized breath, the first group descended into a measured rhythm, stomping on the hollow logs. The sound was thunderous, rolling across the clearing and echoing through the surrounding mountains. Each footfall created vibrations that traveled through the earth, resonating with a force that seemed to awaken the spirits of the forest and river. Children gasped at the power, elders nodded in approval, and the Balian continued chanting, guiding the spiritual energy toward balance and blessing. The rhythm of the first stomp established the heartbeat of the Buklog. Subsequent participants followed, layering their movement in precise sequence. Men's stomps were powerful and disciplined, women added grace and subtlety, and children contributed with enthusiasm and respect. The hollow logs acted as conduits, amplifying the collective energy and carrying it beyond the clearing, ensuring that every prayer, song, and step reached both visible and unseen realms. The platform trembled under hundreds of synchronized feet, a physical manifestation of community unity and spiritual resonance. Every stomp, clap, and movement reinforced interconnection between human, nature, and spirit. The villagers understood that the Buklog was not merely a spectacle, but a sacred communication, a living bridge linking the past, present, and future through the medium of sound, rhythm, and intention. While the first stomps established rhythm, dancers moved around the platform in intricate patterns. Women's hands traced symbolic gestures, weaving through the air like threads connecting earth and sky. Men moved with proud strength, embodying the courage and discipline of the Megalong warriors. Children imitated steps, learning the subtlety of timing, respect, and intention. Flutes, gongs, and drums combined into a complex symphony, each note resonating with both physical and spiritual vibration. The Balian orchestrated these movements with guidance and song, ensuring that the energy remained focused and balanced. She reminded the participants that the Buklog was a dialogue with the spirits, an offering of harmony, unity, and gratitude. Villagers passed jars of Pangasi wine, shared blessings, and observed each other with reverence, recognizing that every action contributed to the collective spiritual resonance. As the first hours of the Buklog unfolded, the clearing became a living entity, vibrating with communal effort, ancestral guidance, and natural alignment. Every stomp, dance, and chant reinforced the sacred rhythms of the Subanen way of life. The villagers realized that the Buklog's power did not lie in spectacle alone, but in the unbroken continuity of practice, respect, and participation. It was a manifestation of unity, a celebration of life, and a profound spiritual experience that connected humans, nature, and ancestors in harmonious expression. As the morning's stomping and dancing settled into a steady rhythm, attention shifted toward the altar at the heart of the Buklog platform. The Balian, adorned in her ceremonial attire of beads, feathers, and vibrant cloth, moved with measured grace, guiding villagers to present their offerings. Rice, fruits, small animals, jars of Pangasi wine, and bundles of woven mats were carefully arranged on mats and trays, each item symbolizing gratitude, abundance, and respect for both ancestors and the spirits inhabiting rivers, forests, and mountains. Families approached the altar with reverence, bowing their heads and whispering prayers. Even the youngest children understood the significance of this ritual, learning that offerings were not simply gifts but deliberate acts of connection with the unseen world. The Balian ensured that every contribution was acknowledged, chanting in a melodic tone that carried through the clearing, harmonizing with the distant gongs and drums. The ritual emphasized that every participant, regardless of age or social status, contributed equally to the spiritual energy of the Buklog. Villagers observed the sequence with disciplined attention. Men carried the heaviest baskets of rice or small animals, while women distributed Pangasi wine, helping neighbors participate fully. Children assisted in minor but essential tasks, arranging small trays, carrying symbolic bundles, or observing the actions of elders to internalize patterns of respect and proper conduct. Every movement, whether sweeping, lifting, or bowing, became a teaching moment, reinforcing the values of mindfulness, humility, and communal interdependence that define Subanen life. Once offerings were in place, the Balian led a series of ritual chants that transformed the clearing into a sacred space resonating with ancestral presence. Her voice rose and fell with the cadence of the gongs and drums, invoking blessings of protection, fertility, and harmony. Each chant carried layered meaning, referencing ancient leaders, river spirits, mountain guardians, and the unseen watchers of the forest. Villagers joined in, repeating responses that blended individual voices into a collective expression of devotion. The midday ceremony emphasized reciprocity between the community and the natural world. Every jar of Pangasi wine, every grain of rice, and every symbolic offering represented gratitude for sustenance, guidance, and protection. The elders explained that neglecting such practices could disrupt harmony, affecting crops, health, and communal relationships. By participating fully, villagers ensured that the Buklog's power was activated not merely through physical presence, but through intention, awareness, and reverence. Music reinforced the spiritual resonance of the offerings. Flutes mimicked the flow of rivers, drums mirrored the heartbeat of the earth, and gongs echoed the call of ancestors. Even the children felt the vibrations under their feet, internalizing the lessons of rhythm, unity, and spiritual communication. Through repeated participation, they learned that ritual and daily life were inseparable, just as offerings honored the spirits. Every act in their homes, fields, and forests contributed to the balance of the community and natural world. The midday ceremony was also a time for communal reflection. Elders reminded the young of stories of Data Luentien, Sanjit the hunter, and other ancestors whose wisdom guided the Subanen way of life. Children listened intently, recognizing that the acts of offering, dance, and song were extensions of lessons in patience, respect, courage, and mindfulness. Families exchanged small gestures of support and encouragement, reinforcing social bonds alongside spiritual devotion. Beyond ritual, the midday gathering fostered social cohesion. Neighboring villages shared insights about harvests, environmental conditions, and familial responsibilities. The Balian highlighted that unity, mutual respect, and attentive participation were essential to sustaining both the Buklog and the community's well-being. Each person's contribution, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, reinforced a complex tapestry of interdependence, ensuring that the festival was not simply an event, but a holistic embodiment of Subanen values. As the ceremony progressed, the clearing glowed with color, movement, and sound. Stomps and chants blended seamlessly with the rhythm of offerings and prayers. Villagers felt the energy of the platform, the reverberation of logs, and the presence of spirits as a tangible force. By the conclusion of this midday segment, Gumutan had achieved a state of collective consciousness and spiritual alignment, ready for the next phase of the Buklog. The experience reaffirmed the power of unity, tradition, and the sacred interweaving of human and natural life that defined the golden days of the Subanen. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the Buklog entered its afternoon phase. The initial rhythm of stomps, once tentative and carefully synchronized, now intensified as participants gained confidence and focus. Hollow logs beneath the platform vibrated with growing resonance, each step generating a heartbeat that seemed to pulse through the clearing, the forest, and even the riverbanks. Children's laughter and excitement intertwined with the measured cadence of elders and warriors, creating a multi-layered auditory experience that blended joy, discipline, and reverence. The Balian moved through the crowd, guiding chants and correcting rhythm subtly, ensuring that the energy remained harmonious rather than chaotic. Her voice wove a melody that lifted the entire assembly into a shared state of consciousness. Each stomp, clap, and dance movement was more than physical exercise. It was a form of prayer, a means to communicate gratitude and seek blessings from both ancestors and spirits. Villagers understood that precision and mindfulness were necessary. The vibrations generated by their collective energy could influence not only the spiritual realm, but also the natural cycles that govern crops, rivers, and forests. Women, adorned in colorful attire, danced in fluid patterns around the platform. Their hand gestures, measured and symbolic, told stories of ancestors, river journeys, and forest guardians. Men, disciplined and strong, contributed power and stability to the rhythm. Children, observing and participating, learned that every movement carried significance. A misstep or hurried motion was gently corrected by elders, reinforcing the values of patience, focus, and unity that underpinned the entire Buklog. The platform itself, now resonating under hundreds of coordinated footsteps, seemed to become a living entity, vibrating with life, history, and spiritual energy. During the intensified afternoon session, the Subanen emphasized their connection with the natural world. Before each cycle of stomps, participants paused briefly to offer silent acknowledgement to the surrounding rivers, trees, and forest creatures. Small offerings of rice or betel nut were laid at strategic points near trees or rocks, symbolizing gratitude for protection and abundance. The Balian explained that the Buklog was a dialogue, not merely a performance. Every stomp, every song, and every movement served as communication with spirits, ensuring balance and harmony. Children observed these gestures keenly, understanding that respect for nature was inseparable from communal rituals. Elders reinforced the lesson, sharing stories of hunters and ancestors who maintained harmony with the environment by observing seasons, listening to the river, and seeking permission from the spirits before taking from the forest. Music amplified this connection. Flutes mimicked bird calls, drums echoed the heartbeat of the earth, and gongs resonated like distant thunder, reinforcing the impression that the village, platform, and surrounding forest were part of one integrated system. This interaction between ritual and environment highlighted the Subanen philosophy that life was an interconnected web. Each participant, from a youngest child to the oldest elder, contributed to sustaining that balance. The afternoon rituals were not simply a continuation of the Buklog. They were the peak demonstration of unity, cooperation, and reverence, blending human labor with natural cycles in a living, breathing spiritual performance. As hours passed, the intensity of the stomps, dances, and chants reached a crescendo. Villagers were physically exhausted, but spiritually exhilarated. The shared energy created a palpable atmosphere of communal unity, where individual effort was inseparable from collective purpose. Every footfall, every rhythmic clap, every melodic chant reinforced the Subanen understanding that the strength of the village lay not in individual prowess, but in the cooperation and shared intent of all members. Elders guided the young in reflection between movements, emphasizing mindfulness and gratitude. Women circulated jars of Pangasi wine, offering blessings, while warriors maintained order and ensured safety, embodying the principles of discipline and service. Children mirrored the movements of adults, internalizing lessons about timing, respect, and the sacred rhythm of life. The forest around Gumutan seemed to respond to the collective energy. Leaves rustled in harmony with drum beats. Birds perched nearby added calls to the chorus, and the river's flow echoed the vibrations of the platform. The afternoon Buklog became an immersive, multi-sensory expression of life, binding humans, nature, and spirit in a profound communion. By the close of this session, villagers felt renewed connection to each other, to their ancestors, and to the natural world, reinforcing the Subanen golden days of harmony, respect, and tradition. As the afternoon energy of stomps, chants, and dances gradually softened, the sun began its slow descent, casting a golden hue over the clearing of Gumutan. Shadows lengthened among the rice paddies, coconut groves, and bamboo houses, signaling that the Buklog was approaching its concluding phase. Villagers, still vibrant with spiritual energy, moved with a measured calm, acknowledging the transition from intense celebration to reflective closure. The Balian, standing at the heart of the platform, began softly chanting, her melodic voice threading through the lingering sounds of gongs and drums. These gentle vibrations carried prayers of gratitude, protection, and harmony toward the spirits, ancestors, and natural world. Families gathered in smaller clusters around the platform, sharing whispered reflections, passing food, and exchanging blessings. Children, though tired from the day's activity, listened attentively to elders recount stories of Dadalin Tien, Sanjit the Hunter, and other ancestors, realizing that the lessons embedded in these narratives were mirrored in the rhythmic stomps, dances, and offerings they had participated in. The elders emphasized that the Buklog was not merely a festival, but a living classroom where spiritual, cultural, and practical wisdom converged. Through reflection, observation, and storytelling, the young internalized the values of patience, respect, unity, and attentiveness to both human and natural cycles. The river near the clearing shimmered under the last rays of sunlight, reflecting the intricate patterns of lanterns and woven cloths. Birds began their evening songs, merging with distant drumbeats to create a final, harmonious soundscape. The forest, which had been alive with echoes throughout the day, seemed to slow its rhythm, acknowledging the culmination of communal effort, devotion, and celebration. Every gesture, from the placement of rice offerings to the alignment of bamboo mats, contributed to a collective consciousness of completion and gratitude. As evening deepened, the focus returned to the central altar. The Balian, accompanied by elders and warriors, guided the final round of offerings. Rice, fruits, jars of Pangasi wine, and small animals were presented one last time, symbolizing the community's unwavering gratitude for the land, spirits, and ancestors who had sustained them. Each family approached the altar with reverence, bowing their heads, whispering prayers, and observing the precise ceremonial gestures taught by elders. Chants, soft yet resonant, echoed across the clearing. Villagers repeated the Balian's words, ensuring that every prayer reached its intended recipient, be it guardian spirits of rivers, ancestral beings of the forest, or the unseen watchers of mountains. Music, drums, gongs, and flutes accompanied these actions, creating an enveloping atmosphere where physical, spiritual, and emotional dimensions of life merged seamlessly. Children observed and mirrored movements, internalizing rituals that would one day define their roles as custodians of the Subanen tradition. The elders emphasized that these final offerings were more than symbolic. They were a reaffirmation of ethical conduct, environmental stewardship, and communal responsibility. The Buklog, as a living embodiment of Subanen culture, required not only participation but mindfulness, respect, and intentionality. By presenting offerings thoughtfully and performing each gesture with sincerity, the villagers ensured that the spiritual resonance of the day would endure beyond the immediate celebration, extending blessings to the crops, homes, and surrounding forest for months to come. As night settled over Gumutan, the final phase of the Buklog began. Families gathered around fires, sharing meals prepared in anticipation of the festival's end. The scent of roasted meat, boiled root crops, and sweet Pangasi wine filled the air, blending with the earthy aroma of the forest and river. Elders recounted tales of ancient rivers, heroic hunts, and the wisdom of ancestors, emphasizing the continuity of knowledge and responsibility. Children listened with rapt attention, recognizing that their role in the Buklog was both participatory and educational. The Balian offered closing blessings, reminding everyone that the day's rituals had reaffirmed the unity of the community, the harmony between humans and nature, and the enduring presence of ancestors. Warriors ensured that villagers departed safely, guiding them along paths illuminated by lanterns, while young ones carried small offerings home, extending the spiritual energy beyond the clearing. By the time the stars reflected in the calm river, the village of Gumutan had returned to a peaceful state, yet the echoes of the Buklog, the stomps, chants, and prayers lingered in every heart. The festival had not only celebrated life, harvest, and spiritual connection, but had reaffirmed the core principles of Subanen existence: unity, respect, interdependence, and harmony with the natural and spiritual world. Every villager, from the youngest child to the eldest elder, felt the profound truth that the strength of their community lay in collective devotion, mindful action, and reverence for all that sustained life. After the Buklog concluded, the village of Gumutan returned to its daily rhythms, but the echoes of the festival lingered. The air was still charged with energy from stomps, chants, and dances, and the villagers carried a renewed sense of unity and purpose into every task. Farmers returned to rice paddies, tending seedlings with careful hands, aware that the soil had been blessed through collective prayers. Hunters ventured into the forests, not merely for sustenance, but in mindful partnership with nature, recalling the teachings of the Balian and elders regarding respect for spirits and balance. Women resumed weaving mats, pounding rice, and preparing food, now with added reverence. Each stitch and rhythmic motion was infused with the knowledge gained from observing and participating in the Buklog. Children followed elders closely, practicing canoe paddling, trap setting, and the preparation of small ritual offerings, aware that these skills were part of the continuum of life. The wisdom of ancestors, embedded in stories, chants, and the day's rituals, have been internalized through experience. Every action, from repairing tools to tending livestock, became a small act of devotion, a way to maintain harmony with both the natural and spiritual worlds. The Balian continued to guide and observe, reinforcing that tradition was not a static display, but a living, dynamic practice. She reminded the villagers that the lessons of the Buklog, cooperation, respect, mindfulness, and spiritual connection, were meant to permeate daily life, ensuring that the community's strength and wisdom endured beyond the ceremonial stage. Every interaction between family, neighbor, and the environment became an opportunity to practice the principles celebrated during the Buklog. In the weeks following the Buklog, Gumutan became a hub of informal education and skill sharing. Elders, having witnessed the successful performance of rituals, began to teach children and young adults the subtleties of their crafts and responsibilities. Boys learned not only hunting techniques and spear preparation, but also the spiritual protocols of forest stewardship, understanding when and how to offer thanks to unseen guardians of the land. Girls honed weaving, mat making, and cloth dyeing, learning how every pattern carried symbolic meaning and blessing. The workshops and communal spaces were alive with activity. Men repaired traps, sharpened tools, and crafted wooden figures representing protective spirits, often narrating the stories of their ancestors' journeys, hunts, and wisdom. Women shared weaving techniques while recounting tales of harmony, patience, and cooperation. Children, observing closely, carried out small but essential tasks, internalizing lessons in responsibility, reverence, and community cohesion. The entire village functioned as an integrated school, where learning was continuous, participatory, and deeply connected to both spiritual and practical life. The elders emphasized that these skills were not merely for survival, but were sacred acts that maintained the continuity of the Subanen way of life. Every woven mat, sharpened spear, and ritual preparation became a living testament to ancestral wisdom, a tangible link between the past, present, and future. Evenings were filled with reflection. Families gathered around fires, recounting experiences from the Buklog, discussing lessons learned, and sharing insights about their responsibilities to the land, community, and spirits. Children listened intently as elders recounted stories of legendary figures like Data Luentien and Sanjit the Hunter, connecting historical wisdom with contemporary practice. The Balian facilitated quiet spiritual exercises, encouraging villagers to meditate, offer silent prayers, and observe the rhythms of the natural world. Rivers, forests, and mountains were again recognized as living entities deserving respect, attention, and reciprocity. Villagers acknowledged that their strength and well-being depended not merely on physical labor, but on the maintenance of harmony between themselves, their community, and the natural and spiritual realms. By nightfall, Gumutan was calm, yet vibrant in spirit. The lessons of the Buklog continued to resonate in hearts and actions. Every chore, every act of care, every shared story reinforced the understanding that the Subanen way of life was sustained through mindfulness, respect, and unity. Life after the Buklog was a continuation of the celebration, a perpetual practice of devotion, learning, and living in balance with ancestors, spirits, and the land. The Subanen people measured time not by calendars, but by the rhythms of nature, and the moon of ripening rice marked one of the most important seasonal festivals. When the rice stalks swayed golden in the wind, signaling that the harvest was near, villages prepared for a series of ceremonies that combined gratitude, music, and dance. The Balian guided the rituals, ensuring that every act, from the offering of the first grains to the blessings over paddies, reflected reverence for both ancestors and spirits of the land. During this festival, men and women adorned themselves with bright cloth dyed in reds, yellows, and greens, creating a living tapestry of color throughout the village. Children carried small lanterns made from carved bamboo, their tiny flames flickering like stars fallen to earth. Songs, chants, and rhythmic gongs accompanied the processions, echoing across rice paddies, rivers, and forests. The music served a dual purpose, celebrating abundance while invoking blessings for continued fertility of the land. The elders explained that the moon of ripening rice was a moment to honor the earth and its cycles. Before cutting the first stalks, offerings of rice, betel nut, and Pangasi wine were presented to the spirits of rivers, forests, and mountains. Farmers paused to give thanks, ensuring that every part of the harvest was gathered with mindfulness. Children observed these rituals closely, understanding that every movement, prayer, and song was a continuation of ancestral knowledge, linking the present harvest to generations of caretakers before them. A few weeks after the rice harvest, the festival of first fruits brought villages together in celebration and renewal. Families presented the first yield of their crops, rice, tubers, vegetables, and fruits, to the Balian, who blessed the offerings and distributed small portions as tokens of shared abundance. The festival reinforced community bonds, teaching that wealth and sustenance were to be shared, not hoarded. The clearing became alive with music, dance, and the laughter of children. Elders recounted stories of legendary hunters, river guides, and ancestral leaders, connecting seasonal bounty with lessons in courage, patience, and cooperation. Women prepared large communal meals, weaving together flavors of roasted meat, boiled root crops, and freshly harvested vegetables. Men repaired tools, sharpened spears, and readied canoes for upcoming river journeys. Children participated by assisting with food preparation, carrying small baskets, and joining in dances and songs, learning that even minor contributions carried spiritual and communal weight. Throughout the Festival of First Fruits, the Balian emphasized reciprocity. Every act of giving, every shared meal, and every song reinforced the interconnectedness of the community, the natural world, and the spiritual realm. Families recognized that abundance was not merely a product of labor, but a gift from ancestors and spirits, requiring gratitude, celebration, and continued vigilance in stewardship of the land. Between festivals, daily life returned to the rhythms of farming, hunting, weaving, and crafting, but the lessons of the cycles persisted. The Subanen viewed each season, moon phase, and natural event as an opportunity to reflect, give thanks, and align with the balance of the environment. Children learned to track river levels, observe animal behavior, and recognize patterns in weather, understanding that their attentiveness contributed to the community's well-being. Evenings became a time for storytelling, reflection, and spiritual reinforcement. Elders recounted tales of Datalin Tien, Sanjit the Hunter, and other figures whose wisdom guided the Subanen through floods, harvests, and challenges. Families shared meals around fires, passed down weaving techniques, and discussed lessons learned from the land and river. Music and song punctuated daily life, reminding villagers that rhythm, harmony, and respect were as essential as physical labor. Through seasonal festivals, the Subanen reinforced a continuous cycle of gratitude, learning, and spiritual alignment. Every planting, harvest, and moon phase was celebrated as a gift, reminding the community that survival and prosperity depended on cooperation, mindfulness, and reverence for ancestors and the spirits that govern the natural world. The Subanen Golden Days thrived not only in ritual, but in the seamless integration of culture, labor, and spiritual life across the seasons. And that's a wrap on today's story from History Teller YT. We explored the life of the Subanen people, from their rivers and forests, the leadership of the Timuay and elders, the preparation and celebration of the Buklog, to the lessons carried forward in daily life and seasonal festivals. Today, we learned the true value of community, unity, respect for nature, and honoring the wisdom of ancestors. Remember, the strength of a people lies not in wealth or weapons, but in harmony, knowledge, and devotion. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again for more fascinating histories from around the world. See you in the next story.